OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
And you're very welcome along to Thursday morning's OTB AM. It's a very special OTB AM this morning because we have a studio guest all the way from La Rochelle, the Hollywood Lights of La Rochelle. Ronan O'Gara, good morning to you.
Ger, Owen, great to be here. Feels strange, back. First time in 2 years, I think, back to Ireland.
Right.
So, yeah.
Have we changed as a people? Are we more welcome, more open, or are we still the shower of bollocks?
I haven't met anyone. I got in really late. I got up early, didn't cross anyone walking across the green.
Okay,
so,
very good.
Excited to be here now for this little segment and get a day's work done, and then back to my real job tonight.
And the real job at the moment, is this a busy time of the year focused just on the upcoming games, or are you already plotting and planning for next year? And
so what's actually happening at the minute is they're kind of making up time during the Six Nations for the games that had COVID issues earlier in the season. So for example, this weekend, and you have to keep the order of the schedules, do you get me? So
you have to play the games in sequence as they were.
Correct, that's the right English for that. So it's Montpellier, Toulon this weekend, then it's Toulon, La Rochelle the following weekend, and on Sunday night it is Clermont, Bordeaux, and there's another game the following, one more game to make it up, so everyone then has played, I think, 20 games, 6 games to go, and it's probably 9 teams within 7 points, so it's carnage.
I mean, it is carnage, but it's also exciting, right?
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting. Because there's different ways of going about it too, because with the history of the bouclier and trying to be competitive and to win it, it's nearly takes off once you get to the phase finale, as they say, the barrage. You probably need a lot of juice in the tank at that stage, but you got to make sure you're in the top 6. Last year was probably different because it was, I put a big emphasis probably on, finishing first or second, which we did, which was brilliant because you go straight to semi-final, which means you're 80 from a final. But we were really good in the semi-final, and then within 10 minutes of the final, you knew against Toulouse that they mentally, physically had an advantage on us. I was just reading, they've 10 in the French squad this weekend, so similar to Leinster, I suppose, in how they supply the bulk of the team to the French team. But you're obviously constantly plotting in your head how you can go about putting this so-called masterpiece in place.
Yeah, and so that's always there for the short term, but I presume a lot of agents are bringing you and saying, my guy's free at the end of the year, he wants to come. Is that always happening? Does that happen 12 months a year, or is there a period of the year where that ramps up?
It's an interesting question. Usually, with a little bit of experience now, getting a bit wiser, that's not a call you want,
right?
Because you have to have a good system, a good plan, a really, I suppose, the strengths, the weaknesses, SWOT analysis nearly when it comes to your recruitment, and it's something that's hugely, hugely important. You can keep telling yourself you're a great coach, but I think, as we all know, there's certain cattle that are better than other cattle in the field.
Yeah.
And I think a good example of that would be Will Skelton. There's very few, I suppose, players, athletes of that, not capabilities, but of that measurements available in the market. So, like, it just helps when you kind of, how do you convince him that it's the right thing to leave Saracens to come to play? And I think that was a big, I suppose, plus for me, in the fact that he wanted something different. He wanted to try something else, but the coaching has to be good. But once you get that, you have. We've done good recruitment for next season. That's next season, George. It doesn't count. People are there. Well, we'll have a good plan, but 4 months in sport is so long, so it's only getting exciting now. My field season feels that it hasn't even started.
But if you don't do the recruitment well now, then next season could be not a write-off, but you're behind the 8 ball straight away. And I'm always struck by the fact that these are different jobs, the recruitment job and the coaching job. Like in football, traditionally the soccer manager would have bought his players for his style of play, but now clubs realise that actually it's a very difficult thing to know all the best talent in all of the leagues around Europe. And so, like, do you get help with that? Is there somebody else that you can lean on? Yeah,
I think it's a really fast changing space. It's one of the meetings I'm going to have today. There's a few people in Dublin that are very, very good at this in terms of, I suppose, analysing the data and making sense of the data from schools players from South Africa, Australia, England, France, all around the world, to first, second, third division players all over the world, and understanding who's performing and having actually a system that a coach can kind of respect, understand, and put that into the kind of the big pot to give you the data to say, yeah, this guy will go well here, or this guy under the high ball, for example, is very, very strong. This guy on his right shoulder isn't capable of making tackles one-on-one. All stuff like that when you're playing week to week, you get churned out by next game. But then in the background, there's some really smart brains that are providing information like that, and something now that I think as a player I was probably reluctant to it. I was big in the GPS and the competition within the players and in the team, but I think as in the management in the background you have to be aware of this. But I think I remember years back, maybe was it Wales in Six Nations games, were changing players because of drop off in intensity or in meters per second later in the game, which I don't think that's probably the best way of doing it either, in the fact that you kind of have to understand the flow of a game, and sometimes there's way more action on the right hand side than there is on the left hand side if your plan is to hit midfield and either sweep or to play the same way. So you've one back row maybe that's not involved at all, but he essentially is doing a lot of benefit for the team by holding his width, that people are attracted to him. But the data, it's a fascinating space, but I think it's the same, I suppose, as putting in robots, is it, into factories and stuff. You need that human element.
Yeah, totally. And is rugby kind of catching up on other sports a little bit with that stuff? Like, is there a world where in 5 years' time every individual club has somebody whose job it is to make sure that they have the best data for the players I'm talking about? So at the moment, if you're a football manager in the League of Ireland, you can sign up to Y Scout and you get information on every single footballer who's registered, and you can track kids all around the world in almost all their games and give analysis on the quality of their performance. It doesn't seem like we're at that point yet with rugby.
I'd say we're very close to it. I think that will be happening, I'd say, within the next 12 months. I think there's a guy, Derek McNamara, I think his name is, and incredibly interesting. And I think he was involved with an American company, but I think he's gone back on his own now, so he can keep more control of it.
Right.
And I think it's some of his ideas or some of his potential suggestions, and just make you stop and go, okay, there is something here definitely, because as you say, you like where you could get an Espoir, for example, to come in to a French club under the age of 20, he just has to play 3 years and then he becomes GIF. Like, people don't understand that. Even a lot of young Irish players here, if they can get that licence or that qualification for 3 years, they're made.
Do you have it for life? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you can go and come back and come back.
Exactly. That's the strength of the French game.
Okay, right.
Well, exactly.
So if you're a good 19-year-old who hasn't quite made the first team here, you could go to France and play 3 years, or do you need to be 17 to go?
No, 18, I think.
Okay.
See, they all call it before 2000. None of that doesn't register in my brain when they talk about 2000, 2001. He's 2003. You're like, what age is that? But also, more interestingly, and it's something that hasn't been probably talked about enough, if you're a Southern Hemisphere front row, for example, and you did 3 years from 18 to 22 in an academy in France, and then you want to go and chase the All Black dream,
you can do that, but come back at the end and be.
You would have your GIF qualification,
Right.
which all of a sudden gives you a really, really good living.
Yeah.
And then you have the best of both worlds, maybe.
That's interesting, because we had Ross Hamilton on the show last week talking about the speed of the Ireland breakdown, and it's that level of data analysis where we know speed of the breakdown is very important, but he had it to like the number of seconds, and it was 2.2 for Ireland, and we were second, and he was like, this had happened now, so consistency over a long period of time, it is something that they've clearly focused on in the Ireland camp, and it's that bit that the data becomes transferable to us and as lay people when we're watching the game. So it actually improves and enhances the quality of spectating.
Correct, but also I think that's a perfect example of understanding probably the data and the coaching mixed in one. So if it's something that I'm absorbing as well, because they're of the same school, Donnchadh Ryan, Paul O'Connell, so they would be huge fans, students of that area of the game, and understanding how you can speed it up and what slows it down. So they actually, getting the speed of the ruck ball, they actually want the players to get to the ruck before it's even happened, so that there doesn't become a ruck. And you're like, oh, well, how actually does that happen? But if I had a video here, I'd be able to explain it to you, and it's really, really powerful how it works. And I think it's an area of the game where, on the flip side of that, we have someone in our staff that would be very much intent on messing up the opposition's ruck ball. So
they're all part of the same thing, though, aren't they? It's like if we slow theirs down to 3.5 seconds, then all of a sudden our defence is fully set and they're not going to be able to get it.
Yeah, and in rugby, it's the first two phases or first two collisions that are very important. So if you don't stop Robbie Henshaw or Bundy Aki, and then you've, James Ryan or Josh van der Fleer on a good line coming around the corner on phase two, all of a sudden they're on the front foot. The opposition are retreating. It just makes it very, very easy. But for example, if you get a good shot on the gain line in first phase, and you have an inside threat on the ball and an outside threat potentially going to slow that down or look for penalty, because diving off the feet will be a penalty. So there's so many games within the game around the ruck at the minute. But yeah, I think it's a hot topic, but the ruck has always been very, very important for the last 20 years. There's probably a lot more detail available now in terms of data.
Yeah. He was speculating that what Ireland had done was focused on this, obviously, and it sounds like that's true, and then have they're playing a relatively high risk game where they're not committing huge numbers. So the idea is to get the ruck in, get out of it fast, keep the ball moving, and don't commit a huge amount. So if you do get turned over, the 3 or 4 times in the game that you get turned over, you're willing to take that punch each time, on the basis that the speed of your ruck is so impressive over the 70 or 80 or 90 rucks that there are, that on balance it's much better to be.
Yeah. And I think that was Joe Schmidt's greatest strength, I think, in the fact that that's how he coached. But what we're seeing now is probably then the evolution of that, and the fact that I think Joe was so, I suppose, intent on making a ruck, but in France they don't like going to ground, or they don't like ruck and jeu debout, they try and keep the ball alive and play it out of the tackle. So you can see all the Toulouse players, they will probably, their last option will be to fall, while in Ireland for a time, when we were so ruck focused, the easiest thing was to fall, to create a ruck, knowing that your two nearest supporters would be there, otherwise it wouldn't be the ball carrier's fault. Now I think we've had an understanding that the ball carrier is hugely important, that he has to fight to try and win his one-on-one in front of him, and then you either play the ball out of the tackle, or if you need to ruck, we can ruck, but there's probably that obsession with the ruck is gone. But for so many years it was so good for Ireland, but then it just became stale, and the fact that the opposition, I think, became aware that there isn't going to be this kind of capacity to play instinctively, and that became probably the downfall. But I think from a young coach, you have to admire and the success Joe had in that regard. Now it's coached by Paul, who is a massive fan of Joe Schmidt, but what's coming in then is that as you correctly said, there's more risk taking, there's more capacity to play the moment in front of you, to, as you say, to see what picture the opposition are giving you, and there's not this probably negative arms up in the air approach if there's an error. So it's kind of, we dig in for each other.
Yeah.
And did that change happen as quickly as it seemed to us? Like inside the game, did you see that alteration in how the game should be played coming all along? Because to us it was like end of 2018 this is working, start of 2019 this is not working.
Yeah, I think that's what happens at top level sport. When it stops, you fall off a cliff. You look at, I suppose, you mean going to the World Cup and the performances at the World Cup, it was kind of, it looked that it just wasn't happening on. And when you're living that and you're in that, it reminds me of probably the 2007 World Cup. It's horrendous. You feel you so want to change, and you do everything to change, and you work so hard during the week to change it, but you're nearly powerless to do anything about it, because you're eaten up alive inside by not being able to do it.
I just want to tell everybody what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We've obviously got Ronan O'Gara with us in the studio for a little while longer. Newspapers coming up at 8:05. Martin Lipton at 8:20. Sports news at 8:40. The very latest from the Hurling pod with Will at 8:50. And Colm Boyle is going to join us at 9:10 to talk to us about what's happening this weekend. And Philly McMahon is also going to talk to us around about 9:30 this morning. Can I ask you about Sexton and the new deal? And Brian just was sitting where you were sitting during the week, and he was making the point that now modern athletes are going on to their 40s, and the Tom Brady example is the one I think that Stuart Lancaster had made to Sexton after the last World Cup, to kind of say this isn't the end. This, you can keep going, and he's obviously still going. He's still very effective. It sounds like a lot of Irish rugby fans are penciling him in now. That's our out half problem for the World Cup solved.
Yeah, it would be. And it was a most logical step during the week because of the way he's playing. So I think there's probably the separation between, that's what happened during the week was a contractual issue, in the fact that if Johnny has the appetite and wants to play to the next World Cup, that path is very clear for him to go chase that. I think in reality it isn't straightforward in the fact when you get to his age, it becomes difficult. Not to say it can't be done, but I think he's in a position with his performances this season where the team needs him, and as long as that is the case, then he will drive on. What is very different though is NFL to rugby union. Rugby union is a phase game where you have to play close to the gain line and you don't have protection. What also happens is that when you go to big competitions, you have probably 5 or 6 games within a 6-week period, where it's very difficult probably to play week in, week out at that age, because I think what people sometimes miss is the fact that when you're such a competitor and your team are trying to win a qualifying semi-final of big competitions, training is hugely important. So people miss the point that you have to train hard to get the best out of you and the team, and that's where I suppose the growth in the team comes between now and the next World Cup. And as you saw, he was excellent against Wales, but Monday or Tuesday after that, after a big game on the Saturday, went hard and probably a tweak in his hamstring. That happens at that age, and that's something that I think that the public have to expect from, I suppose, if you were in the Irish management team, it would be interesting to see how they're going to manage the number 2 and number 3, because I think it would be probably an overestimation if you're counting on him for every game. That for me at that age, it's not possible. I think he's an incredible competitor and a massive willingness to get Ireland to a semi-final, which is always going to be in a player's thing, but like Andy Farr will have to have that plan where at the minute the number 2 is underplayed, probably prepared and undercooked for Johnny to miss a period of 3 or 4 games. What I think you're looking for there is that you're looking to upskill Joey with game time. Is it Harry Byrne after that with game time?
We don't know.
Jack Carty, but it's...
And there's not many games to find out.
And the games are big games. You look at the calendar ahead, it's England, Scotland, New Zealand, I think maybe America, is it South Africa, Australia. Brilliant games. So it's...
What would you do?
Wouldn't you love to have that choice? But it's there's a huge, obviously, skill in keeping Johnny simmering and on the ball. But like the reality is for me that you have to get as much minutes into whoever you're because if Johnny starts every game, the reality is I think if he plays 50 or 60, it's fantastic. Or does he finish the last 30?
Which would you prefer? Because it sounds like we're actually asking him too much to be our starting out half for a tournament like the World Cup. Like the point you made about the injuries. Jamie Vardy was out for 2 months with a hamstring injury, comes back, injures his knee, he's gone for another month. And Vardy's 18 months younger than Sexton is. Like players at that age get injuries all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because if they don't push hard in training, they won't get to because they're fighting for their time at that stage, and they need to train well to give them that confidence to know I can do this. And age is just a number, but it's not just a number at times because your body.
So do we transition quickly in the meantime? Let's park the World Cup, right, and see whoever is the best out half at the World Cup and whoever is fit at the time, you pick them for those games. But should we actually be getting to the situation where we're starting Carberry and Sexton's on the bench for games sooner rather than later? Like certainly in the summer, but maybe before that.
Yeah, but I think there's been such a huge focus on these 6 nations that it seems to me that they're going to probably go strongest team against England, which includes Sexton. I would say there'd be potential to change that against Scotland, is how I read it as a complete outsider. That would be my thinking on it. Then I think the summer tour gives you different gives you different options but as you say, it's you need to be kind of understanding who the number 2 is too, because it's only, I know only, but it's only in the fact that you're trying to grow the younger guys' games, and that 15 months is very important to them. While that will seem short, but for someone like Johnny, 18 or 15 months is a long time, because it's at that age it's a not a difficult, but it's a challenging road to put yourself in the best physical position.
You said there that there's obviously not enough time to find out how good your number 2 is, or to road test your number 2 in test rugby. Is that actually why Joey Carberry disappointed a few people with his performance the last day? Because he hasn't been given that opportunity, and that is the exact sort of growing pain that is going to need to be experienced in order to get closer to Johnny Sexton?
Yeah, because he's played very little rugby too over the last 2 years from an injury point of view. He's anything that's kind of, if you look at his list of injuries, it was quite a lengthy list. So whether he's playing, with the, I suppose, fractured nation of the season too, with the URC competition, he's not. In that position, he needs to be playing 80 minutes 10 times in a row. But I'd say if you look at his minutes, it's way off that. And I'm only stabbing here now, and I'm not. That may not be accurate, but I think, so, especially as an out half, you just get better and better and better by owning that position and getting comfortable in that jersey. But like that, obviously, dictates, but the union run the provinces, and the fact that it could be okay, well, you need Joey playing at 10 every game he's available, because that'll make the national team in a better position.
And if they're thinking right now that Sexton is going to be their number one out half at the World Cup, does it not then make sense to give him this summer off? Because is he going to be able to play all throughout this summer, all throughout this autumn, and for Leinster, and then of course pre-season or pre-World Cup test matches next summer? Like, there's going to have to be some bit of give, you'd suspect, for a player of his age at that point. So you pull Sexton out of one of those windows, surely, do you? And you can't pull him out of the Six Nations next year.
No, you can't, exactly. But that's managing your players and knowing what buttons to push and how do you get the best out of them. And it's probably not a one-way conversation. I think you have to feed back too from how the athlete is feeling and how does he view things. I think, as you said, though, it's the management who decide this and probably make the formula for being successful at a World Cup. If you were the player, and I remember back, and you're being told I'm not throwing to New Zealand when there's a possibility of making history, it's a very, very difficult decision to swallow on. But if the players don't decide, you know, I mean, that's the big difference. That when you go to the other side, you understand that the player's mentality is kind of a one lens view, while from a staff's point of view, you have everything kind of discussed and probably chatted through. Where
does a player change your mind ever after you think you've made your mind up?
No, I don't. For me, that would be that you are. You weren't probably decisive in your own thoughts before you had the meeting. I think what a player can do is most definitely make you aware of his point of view and potentially have a new point of view that you may not have thought about. But I mean, for example, I think when it's, you mean, lately you've kind of, for me, learning, you know, you fitness test a player before a game, and yeah, I'm fine, coach, I'm perfect. So I did too. And one guy blew up after 1 minute 20, and the other guy was past it, was okay, and looked me in the eye and said fine. But then 5 hours later, he went on the pitch and he was dead.
Right.
So like that for me was a good learning. The fact that he won the fitness test, but he failed the game. What did I need him for the game?
Yeah.
But it's hard at times to, but that's where you need to be not popular to kind of go, well, no, sorry, what's best for the team today is you're out, get yourself ready for Monday and you'll have another go.
One last thing that I wanted to kind of just tease out, the evolution of the style of play we've talked a little bit about. How do we make sure that it continues to get better between now and the World Cup, and that we're not peaking now, basically? The PTSD and the trauma of the last World Cup hangs heavy over Irish rugby. Like,
yeah.
We are...
It's all forgotten about now, and the fact that we're on probably a spurt in the curve.
Yeah, a year out, like we were the last time.
Yeah, even more, even 18 months out.
Mm.
Yeah, and that would be...
how do you keep the spurt going, I suppose, is the question.
I think you just... You stay in the moment, and I think you make short-term kind of growth very, very important, and creating competition within the squad. For example, you know, when you look at I suppose the way the squad have moved on from injury to the loose head at
Andrew Porter.
Jeez, how could I ever forget that? What a player. Andrew Porter, you know, who for me is just so valuable to any team. He's playing great rugby, but it was just, okay, 40 minutes kind of, that's dealt with. We're on, it's an opportunity for someone else. They have, I suppose, genuine competition in so many places that's what you're looking for. And once you've established that, it makes it very competitive, but it's still, you know, dependent on Johnny being in form, because if you take that out, it's Carberry on form, which is like, it's not the same team. It's like, you mean, for me, I think, and yeah, Eddie Jones gets gets a rap from certain people, but I think his preparation for World Cups is fascinating, and the fact that he's so well taught through of what he wants to achieve at World Cup time, and that's he goes, okay, judge me on that. And I think he's won one, I think, and been in 3 other finals. So I think he knows what he's doing. And for him this weekend, he's going to see no Farrell, no Tuolagi, and 2 of the Vunipolas missing. And I think he's interested to see where his team is, knowing that when he has them, England could potentially be 30-35% better.
Yeah.
Because they're big pieces of anyone's jigsaw with the size of the 2 men.
The English media are like saying, "Oh, it's 2 games to save his job." I'm like, that makes no sense. He's in the middle of like churning through all these players and going, "Yeah, you can be part of my team. You can't be. You haven't shown up. You're not good enough." Like that's obviously they haven't won the Six Nations.
And exactly,
so likely they will.
And it's but after the first game, it was kind of like, okay,
yeah, let's build for the World Cup.
Yeah, but I think, there's so many people, I suppose, that are. If you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. But he's kind of plucked Anthony Seaball, is it, the Brisbane Broncos coach, who had a horrible season as the general manager in NRL, and was on the floor, and now he's in as his defence coach in England, because I think he understands that maybe I can get 1, 2, 3% of just probably alternative thinking from this guy, because he understands they have limited time to probably get the ideas across, but it's probably maybe his value is in meetings and in kind of, for me, the NRL is 6 months ahead of rugby union, so everything you see in terms of
must be kind of annoying, is it? Oh, look at those guys.
Yeah, but you see now, you watch that, it's a fantastic competition, but you watch the phase plays that happen in union, most of those ideas are plucked from the NRL, and these kind of playing out the back and the pods and stuff. It's because obviously it's so much easier to set it up and create in rugby league because there's no ruck.
Yeah.
So you just get a line against a line attack. So you kind of have to be smart in how you structure your defence and attack, and they have good skill levels. But there's so many, I suppose, subplots for the weekend.
Living in France, do you have a different sense of the French media? Are you reading everything, or is it okay to ignore it? Because this is in the context, Paris Saint-Germain beaten last night from a very winnable position, 2-0 up against Real Madrid, and they lose 3-2. You were probably travelling and didn't see the game, but the L'Équipe player ratings are fairly typical L'Équipe. So it's a 2 for Donnarumma, 3 for Kimpembe, 2 for Marquinhos. After that, things get a bit better, apart from Neymar, who gets a 4, and Hakimi, who gets a 4. There's 5, 7 for Mbappe and Verratti, 6 for Messi.
Jeez, I was expecting to be a lot lower considering the French media. No, I think
these are generous for L'Équipe, aren't they?
Yeah, especially, I suppose, considering it's not the first time we've been here with Paris Saint-Germain.
No.
And they're hugely disappointed, obviously. Yeah, there's massive interest in that game last night. Incredible. And the fact that, but I think, there's something missing there, obviously.
Is there any chance that the rugby team could end up being as flaky as Paris Saint-Germain? And that would be great for the rest of the world, wouldn't it?
I don't think so, though. There seems, for the first time, not the first time, but in a long time, it feels like there's a very solid base to the French rugby network group, team, management. They are very united, it seems, and that's not just the first 30. That seems to be what they have there, is that they want all the players that are club players now want to play for France, which wasn't the case. It was before. It was earn a good living, and if I get to play for France, it's a bonus.
Yeah. Are the French rugby media the same as L'Équipe, or the player ratings tend to be 2s and 3s on weekends?
I haven't seen many of the ratings. I think what's good over there is the fact that they write the question, and then exactly as the player or coach says.
Okay, yeah.
So it's very much in context.
Yeah, because I read somewhere in the papers today, it was a question about something is being ridiculous, and Eddie Howe answered the question, but was he actually asked, was it ridiculous, or was that the view of the person? Whereas actually, if you see the question, there's an opportunity for you to make your mind up.
It's very, very different.
Yeah.
And it's very, very accurate. And
so you can't complain if you say something stupid, basically.
It's there in black and white.
That's on me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's no, but there's huge interest in the rugby team as well. So now with that, yeah, there'll be negative there too around Paris Saint-Germain, but there'll be well, it's tomorrow night, the big game in Cardiff, and they've had I think a lot of illness in camp this week. Well, they've 2 COVID cases, but I think there's a lot of flu in France.
Right,
seems to be swirling around, and I think Aldred was off early in the week. Fiku was off, so I mean, I think they'll be too powerful and too good for Wales, I think. But you still want to be making sure you're near 100% for that game.
Give us your prediction for the England game.
It's a game, I think, that all of a sudden from the outside you're looking at that Ireland are favourites, and I think that's very, very dangerous in the fact that England at Twickenham are very different. They're very usually very, very good in Twickenham. It's I think Ireland need to be on top of their game to come away with a victory. But there's no reason why they can't be. There seems to be, I suppose, since the French game, you watched that again, Ireland were inaccurate in certain areas, left opportunities out there, didn't probably put France under the pressure that they needed, especially in the first 40, then kind of played their game and were good. Tadhg Furlong, I think, is exceptional what he can bring to a team, not in a scrum or in close quarters. His capacity to be able to kind of release backs with the timing of a pass is exquisite, and very few players, backs included, can do what he can do. So it makes for, you know, a 50-50 game for me, Ger. I think Ireland are probably more confident. England are very much in the unknown. I think that's probably, if you're Marcus Smith, I think that's probably an advantage for him. He'll just play. For me, he looks ready to have a massive impact on the world stage, and makes it very exciting. Looking at the English team, it's for the first time, I think, in a long time, I don't have very good knowledge of the individual players in their team, so I'm still kind of trying to understand who's going to play and why is he the winger, why is he 15 and why is he 9. But it's a fascinating game, but I think for me it's very, very difficult to call.
Yeah, okay, all right, great to have you with us.
Cheers.
Right about this time last year you were going shopping around in the Munster for an out half. Is there anything that you want to tell us, any of those recruitment bits you want to just...
No, he turned me down, so no, there's at this stage, what are we? It's business done.
Anything you want to tell us about that hasn't broken yet?
No.
Okay. Ronan O'Gara, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be back talking the Champions League next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The football pod on OTB Sports.
I don't think Dublin are going to be right in time. I think if it was the old season, I would still be very worried about Dublin, but I just can't see them getting right in time for it. Mayo, Kerry, Tyrone.
Who plays Mayo in the final? I told you, the Dubs are timing it for the All-Ireland final.
Get the hop on everyone else and hear the football pod first on the OTB Sports app every Tuesday. For the latest on GAA, rugby, football and much more, download the OTB Sports app, turn on push notifications and hear it here first.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Forced, errors and turnovers and the whole shebang.
Benzema! Oh, what a goal. 2-2. Oh my God, 75 minutes on the clock. They've equalised. This is an unbelievable goal. It's an unbelievable goal all round.
What a reaction from Real Madrid.
Very interesting. 2-2 in aggregate. No away goals, of course. So we are level. Who'd you fancy on penalties?
Oh,
Vinicius in again. Oh, Real Madrid have scored. It's Benzema. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
What just happened?
What are we saying about you can't get excited about these Champions League games anymore?
Oh my God. 3-1 Real Madrid, 2 goals in 2 minutes. Karim Benzema with a hat-trick.
What have they done, Joe?
Slayed by the King was the headline on L'Equipe. They think Karim Benzema is the king after his hat-trick last night. It's hard to disagree. It's interesting that it was a Frenchman slaying Paris Saint-Germain too. Does he go back to Paris Saint-Germain, have like a couple of years at the end of his career, MLS style? Instead of going to America and raking in the cash, he can just go back to Paris and go.
That might be the situation that PSG are in. Does Kylian Mbappe want to play with his buddy in Real Madrid for a little while? Be a good little buddy cop act up front for them. Maybe they don't need Kylian Mbappe.
Maybe it could be the other way around and they end up doing it in Madrid. It's that there's a bag there that you just need to open the door, Jojo, and it's just underneath there, yeah. So 11 minutes past 8 this morning. Your thoughts on the Champions League last night? You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Interesting post-match reports coming out about the Paris Saint-Germain owner taking this very well.
Yeah.
Allegedly. They saw the match and they were like, yeah, that seems fine. That's no big deal. We're happy to have another defeat at the end of our multi-billion-dollar investment in this team, where we've literally got the greatest footballers of all time together, and we can't win from 2-0 up.
Yeah.
But I'm happy. That's okay. I'm a modern sports owner. I can treat the twin imposters of success and failure the same.
Like, it just shows the unbelievably high stakes that were involved in the Champions League this season for Paris Saint-Germain, given they had signed Lionel Messi. They'd managed to persuade Kylian Mbappe to stay put. I don't know what the situation was with Neymar, maybe the simplest of the three, but this was a sort of just stay put, let's get this thing won, let me bring the trophy and all the pictures of that home to the Middle East, and I will be a hero in Paris, I'll be a hero in Qatar, etc, etc. So this whole thing,
Champions League at the World Cup final, I just have the trophy there accidentally sitting beside the World Cup, and that's the other thing that I've also managed to secure for us.
There you go. So Nasser El Khelaifi didn't take this very well, naturally, last night. There is plenty of reports around the world really this morning. ESPN are reporting it, Movistar are reporting it, but some of the best detail is in Marca this morning. He says that they said he went down to the locker room after the game and attacked a Real Madrid employee, saying, "I'm going to kill you." So this was to do with the fact that Real Madrid, I think, are recording their own documentary at the moment. There may have been a social media person down there loitering around anyway, and when the owner of your opposition club comes down into the area where they're not supposed to be, you probably take out your phone anyway. So Al Khelaifi wasn't happy with that. So himself and Leonardo, the sporting director of PSG, go down into the bowels of the stadium, and they went into in and around near the visiting team's locker rooms. He went looking for the referee, and I guess the whole issue was to do with the suspected foul on Donnarumma for when the time when Benzema overturned the ball. Not a foul whatsoever, and play away lads was an absolutely outstanding call by the referee, but this must have been the issue that upset him. So he went down really upset with the officials, apparently broke a linesman's flag in his anger, and a Real Madrid employee recorded it. As I say, Al Khelaifi, according to Marca, went towards him shouting, "I'm going to kill you," and his own bodyguards had to hold him back. Later, Leonardo then demanded that the images on the Real Madrid employee's mobile should be erased, which had obviously,
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely going to delete that. Not a chance. Not a chance.
Just kind of quoting more from the piece here, and apologies for the Google Translate lack of syntax here, but he said, in the final minutes of the game, he began to show with shouts and gestures what was going to happen minutes later. He duly announced it. He was not the only one, since Leonardo seconded him. Neither the patience nor the attempt to lower the tension was of no use. The top manager, Al Khelafi of PSG, lost his nerve between insults and bad manners. The show continued in the locker room area, but the truth is that he had already broken everything that was considered the minimum rules of behaviour in a box. So he was going crazy upstairs, and he goes downstairs and goes even more crazy. And the referee did record the aggressive attitude of the PSG leaders, who addressed him with threats, blocked the door, and even broke one of the linesman's flags. This is reflected in the minutes in section 7, that in incidents after the game, the president and technical director of PSG showed aggressive behaviour and tried to enter the referee's locker room. When the ref asked them to leave, they blocked the door, and the president delicately hit the pennant of one of the attendees, breaking it. In our language, the linesman's flag, he delicately hit and broke it. It's a little touch there. So the referee's report does have a bit of detail on this.
I mean, this is not. We're not having any Schadenfreude here whatsoever. This is not a delicious little morsel of post match. Give me these little morsels. That's not how we feel this morning at all. We're not reveling in this. We're not enjoying this. This is not like. It's Real Madrid who won, so it's not like But it's like definitely slightly better. Now it's slightly better. They have their own dark past, but sure, look.
Al Khelafi kind of storming downstairs shouting stop the count is what I see happening here.
Kofifi.
Yeah. and Leonardo, obviously his trusty
Leonardo, what are you doing? Delete the phone. No, I'm not deleting the phone, Leonardo. I'm going to publish that. It's going straight in our documentary, and it's going to look absolutely amazing.
You just think of everything who's going to be caught in the crossfire of all this. Like you were talking yesterday about that their league on form is pretty good. They're going to win the league at a canter, but it just feels like that's it. Season's over now. Whereas even more so to Manchester City for obvious reasons. They needed this.
So, Carlo Ancelotti has just come from 2-0 down against the greatest team, not the greatest team in the world. They're not, because they're not a team, but a team festooned with the most expensive and best players that we've ever seen assembled. And Carlo Ancelotti is the mastermind behind it. I wonder, at some level, is Florentino Perez going, am I going to have to give Ancelotti a job next year now as well?
Yeah.
He's also thinking, Poch, I want you, but you're just not good enough. I don't know, is this now of an earthquake in what everybody thinks? Are Man United getting a bit sniffy about Pochettino now because of this?
Possibly. I think Perez.
Or are they thinking we might have a chance of getting him now?
Interesting one. I think Manchester United would have thought they always had a chance of getting him. I think Perez definitely wants something younger and sexier, and he's stuck with Ancelotti because Ancelotti is actually good at his job and is very well experienced, especially on European nights, of getting a good result. And let's not forget, Real Madrid held this thing up 10 years ago to the level that Paris Saint-Germain and Manchester City are currently holding this up, and then they won a load of them, and now Perez is apparently satisfied, and but they've won league titles recently as well, so they've kind of won it all. That Perez does kind of have a very sort of, not a casual relationship with his club, but he can kind of do whatever the hell he wants with it, and he wants to get excitement out of the club, it feels. Of course he wants to win everything, but I definitely feel that there was an attraction to shunting Ancelotti out and getting a Pochettino in next season.
Yeah,
because it felt fresh and new.
Yeah, it's sexy.
Exactly. So now it's like, wow, okay, this guy's actually good. We can't really afford to get rid of him. Do Manchester United fans actually think that last night was some sort of referendum on Pochettino? I wonder. I think that he's in a very difficult position to try and mould these players into a star-studded team, but they should be doing better than the last 16 of the Champions League. Manchester United should have been playing Paris Saint-Germain if there wasn't that big cock-up in the initial draw for round 16, and you'd imagine that PSG would have won that game, obviously. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would probably disagree with that, but it would have been probably an easier tie than Real Madrid. I don't think it necessarily dissuades Manchester United from going after Poch, to be honest, because it is just one collapse in one night, and if you're making a valued decision on your new manager, you should probably be basing it on more than just one night. You should be looking at all the League On games. You should be looking at exactly how the team sets up, trying to find out as much as possible.
It's hard
as
though,
the
because
dressing room
they're
chemistry
so,
that he's involved in.
They're so ahead of everybody else, and they did lose. I don't know.
But that's how you understand the patterns of play, how they do when they're in possession of the ball, when they're expected to win games, and I don't know. It's a huge setback for PSG and for Pochettino, no question about it. But Manchester United, if they wanted to get him, should probably have done a bit more than just last night.
All right, I'm delighted to say Martin Lipton is with us this morning to talk a bit more about this. Martin, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
I'm very well, thanks.
What do you think about what's the Pochettino story now after last night?
Well, funnily I knew. Look, it was really interesting because I thought for an hour they were absolutely outstanding, PSG. Mbappe showed that he is the new king of world football. I thought he was absolutely magnificent, scaring them rigid. They had a good game plan that seemed set up. They were taking them apart on the counter. They were going to win the match 2 or 3-0, it seemed. And then Donnarumma has his moment and they collapse. Now, is that because players panic or because the manager panicked? Did the manager, not react to the situation? Sometimes it can happen. I mean, if you remember, it wasn't that long ago, the boot was on the other foot with Pochettino against Ajax, with Spurs in that semi-final when they were dead and buried and pulled it round. Sometimes things just happen out of the control of any manager almost, that you can't prevent players discovering lead in their boots. And defensively, I mean, they were all shocking goals, weren't they? None of them should have been conceded. And can the manager be blamed for a series of staggering individual errors where players' heads go?
I don't know. That's the thing. Like, I guess that's why we have shows like this to kind of tease it out and wonder aloud about it. But I guess from Pochettino, in his defence, he will say that if I was building this team, then I would have had Mbappe in my team, but I may not have had Neymar and Messi with him at the same time. One or either of them, sure, but that trio, maybe when things are going against me, I would like somebody who is, a slightly harder worker, a bit more available for the outballs, a bit more, just a different player to help release Mbappe. And perhaps that's his defence when it comes to whatever job is coming next, because it feels like this has now run its course at PSG.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see him being there next season. We know they want Zidane desperately. Always have done, and I think it was going to come at some point sooner rather than later. I mean, there's a danger now that Pochettino doesn't see out the season, that they decide to can him. And if they do, I think he'll be happy to go away. I don't think he's ever been content there. He wanted to go to a team where, like Spurs, to a degree, he wanted to win because he's not won anything at Tottenham. That was important for him, no question about that. Well, he's won the league a couple of times. But what he did want to do was to be able to build a team, as he did at Tottenham. And he's not been able to build a team. He's been given the players that he has to play. And yet it's very hard if you're a manager to say, oh, no, I don't want Mbappe. No, I don't want Neymar. Oh, I definitely don't want Messi. You can't say that. But you probably should be able to say in your own head, I don't want them all. And that's the issue. I don't think any manager would want them at this stage in their careers, as it were. Yes, you want Mbappe at any point. He's fantastic. But Messi is not Messi as was. He's living on faded glories. He's still a talented player, but when you have to play a player who's not delivering, see Manchester United, Cristiano Ronaldo, for a direct comparison, close brackets, and Mbappe, who seems, Neymar, who seems less than committed, then at times you're playing with 9 men. And when it mattered yesterday, when the heat came on, they were a couple of players short on the pitch.
Well, what's interesting is that Pochettino has maybe tried to take control of that situation at times this season, like the Lyon game earlier in the year when Lionel Messi was visibly upset to be taken off at that point. You'd wonder if the more Pochettino tried to push against this, the more the hierarchy pushed down on him.
When, Nasser Al-Khelaifi has said we're going to spend this money on Messi, it wasn't for him to sit on the bench, was it? Leonardo is his master's voice. He passes the messages on to Pochettino. He's been told in no uncertain terms that you have to play these players. That's why we paid so much money for them. Basically, you're not the manager. You're the bloke who writes out the team sheet. That's what it comes down to.
We were talking with Graham Hunter yesterday, and he was saying that Real Madrid definitely were very interested in Pochettino in the past and would want to finally consummate that relationship, and that Ancelotti felt like a little bit of a stopgap anyway, and sure, weren't they going to more than likely it seemed like more than likely they were going to go out last night, and that would have been handy for Florentino Perez. There's the successful Paris Saint-Germain manager who was leaving them and the best players in the world to come to us. It's a big coup. Now we've just beaten them. It certainly diminishes somewhat the possibility of him ending up at Real Madrid. It doesn't end it, obviously, but there's a good chance Ancelotti gets another year off the back of something like this. So again, they could get spanked in the quarterfinals, and we all have a different opinion on that. But where now do you think Pochettino is more likely to end up next season? Is it more likely Manchester than Madrid?
I think so, but it's interesting because Perez has always had this strange thing whenever he's been there, and Real Madrid have actually not liking the most successful managers in many ways. You go back to the turn of the century, and they really were desperate to get rid of Del Bosque, even though he won them 2 Champions League crowns. You know, they've always seemed to be wanting to sack Ancelotti from the moment he got there. Both his spells in charge, even though he keeps delivering trophies, it's rather odd. But then again, that's Real Madrid. Perez wants a trophy manager. He wants to have a nice, bright, shiny thing to point to. Look, I've got that. But suddenly that lustre has gone off Pochettino. It would appear in the eyes of the fans on the basis of this. Now, I think actually he's a really talented manager. But does he fit Real Madrid? You know, remember he was very close to there at the end of, I think it was 2018 season when he stayed at Spurs. And probably he thinks now he should have gone. You know, he's one of those would have been the right time to go when he stayed on. And, you know, I maybe it's just not meant to be for him to go to Real Madrid at any point. Where he does go, though, is less clear. I still think United's a viable option, but there seems to be hints and insinuations that Ten Hag is more preferred at this stage. It's a bit odd, isn't it? The whole thing seems strange. And Pochettino's a bit of a crossroads in his career. His next move has got to be the right move. I genuinely believe, and this is just an opinion from me, that when Tottenham appointed Nuno last summer, it was because they thought Pochettino would be available before Christmas.
Wow, I didn't realise that at all.
I'm not saying it's just a feeling I have. I'm not saying it's true. I just get that sense that Tottenham thought that he would be available. Nuno was a stopgap. He wasn't on a particularly long-term contract. And then they had to move early when it all started to go horrifically wrong. And Pochettino wasn't available when they thought he might be. And then they've made the decision they've made. I'm not a bad one at all, but I'm just saying that, you know, it could well have been if events had been different. We know last summer that Pochettino did want to go back to Tottenham and that Tottenham were interested in him. That
was my question. Would the Levy-Pochettino relationship have recovered to a point where they could work together progressively into the future?
Yeah, and there's no doubt about that. Look, I think there was a feeling that in an ideal world they'd have given Pochettino a 6-month sabbatical rather than sack him when he did go. And that's just not viable in football these days. There was a sense that it had run its course in that incarnation, but that it was a relationship that could be rekindled with the same fervour and passion in the future.
That's like there's a deep love affair there, which means Pochettino might find it difficult to go to Manchester and compete against that team. But look, I guess, you know, there will be many inducements.
All sparing love, war and football, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
And the making him the second or third highest paid manager in world football will probably ease his pain as he sleeps on his bed of money at night. But he doesn't seem like he's particularly motivated by money, so I don't want to stress that too much. There's a couple of other things I wanted to talk to you about. The Antonio Conte experience is wild. It is a roller coaster, and I don't know if we've had you on since his press conference where he was like, you know, I've lost 4 out of the last 5 games. Maybe I'm not good enough. We definitely were thinking this sounds like a kind of end game, a brinkmanship, and it was before the Chelsea game. It was like, or before the City game rather, and it, you know, and then the City performance is so spectacularly brilliant, and then the next performance is awful, and there's another one in the middle of that in the cup, and you're like, what is going on here? And then they turn around again. What is going on here?
Well, first of all, I think it's pretty clear that Antonio Conte wears his heart on his sleeve. The problem is he likes to sort of conduct open heart surgery in full public view without anaesthetic. which I don't think does anyone any favours, but that's part of him. He's always been that sort of manager. What he thinks, it seems, is that these players aren't capable of repeating performances with a 3-day break. But if you give them a week to work on them, they'll listen to instructions. So when they've had a proper time working with Conte, they've tended to go out and win. Now, last week they went 4 days, I think, between. They were Tuesday. They got beat by Middlesbrough. They had basically a week to prepare for Everton. Turned up on Monday. They had a full week before the City game. So when they have a bit more time, they tend to perform. So on that basis, they should be okay on Saturday because they've had 5 days to get ready for United. But they are inconsistent, even by Tottenham standards this season. They are so up and down. It's like they're bipolar, isn't it? You know, they really can't have any level of certainty and equanimity. Maybe that's a byproduct of a manager who's so Vesuvio. I don't know. That maybe if he were a bit calmer, they would be less inconsistent. But we don't know. And one of the reasons that you've got to be honest about it is a lot of these players aren't good enough. They aren't. There's half a dozen players who are 2 or 3 who are absolutely top class, another 2 or 3 who are pretty decent, but quite a lot just aren't good enough, and they won't be there next season.
One of those who we definitely didn't think was going to be there next season and who hadn't looked like he was good enough for the last period of time to play in Conte's or in a Champions League competing team was Matt Doherty. But his form in the last couple of weeks has been excellent. And you think back to Victor Moses, that's obviously the example that we're drawn most comfort from here from
Kevin De Bruyne.
Our Republic of Ireland perspective.
Kevin De Bruyne is the comparison for Matt Doherty.
Well, I'm hoping the long term, range of outcomes include him. People going, wow, look what he did with Victor Moses. What's going on there? Why is he suddenly playing well?
If it is because he knows that Royal's not good enough. Emerson Royal is simply not good. The biggest waste of 25 million Spurs have ever spent. So Doherty's seen a chance there. He's playing on the right of a 5, which is much more natural. I think that's fair to say.
100%, yeah.
And he's been encouraged to do what he's good at, which is get forward and deliver. And the goal he scored against Leeds, he wouldn't have made that run 2 months ago. He wouldn't have made the run. He'd have been stuck on halfway. So he's been encouraged, and a couple of passes on Monday night. I think, blimey, that's the new Perlo there at right back for Tottenham. I think that in reality, realistically, more likely is that he will be one of 2 right wing backs next season, and he'll play half the games, maybe slightly under half the games. He'll try but Royal will be the one that goes. As it stands at the moment, Doherty stays, Royal goes, they'll bring somebody else, and they seem to be really keen on Jed Spence, who's currently at Forest on loan from Middlesbrough, who's done really well in the FA Cup this season. They seem to really fancy him. And they've also looked at Lamptey at Brighton. But what you've got there with both of those is attacking wing-backs. So that gives you an indication of how Conte wants to play. And that style of play would appear suited for Doherty, because we've seen that in a system where he's given license to get forward and has been encouraged to do so and has gained confidence from doing so. And the other thing is that watching the games, the players are no longer scared to give him the ball. And I think for quite a while, they were a little bit fearful of giving him the ball.
Well, his form didn't follow on from what he was capable of. It was probably because he was playing as a right back, and he's just not a flat back 4 right back at the start. So Conte's planning for next season. Is it safe to assume that the open heart surgery, as wild a ride as it's been, will calm down over the next while, and that the next transfer window will be Antonio Conte's fingerprints with Paratici, and they're going to invest in his desire for a playing staff that fits the style of play that they knew he was going to bring when they signed him, and that actually the referendum, the seemingly match off referendum on whether or not he was going to be there next season, that's passed?
No, it'll be decided by what happens in the window. If they don't deliver, he'll go off. He'll explode. and he'll make it impossible to stay because he will take them to the brink, and he'll just destroy the club in many ways. Is what he does. I also think it's hugely important next summer for Kane's future. I think if Kane sees that they are serious and they're giving Conte the players he wants, that he will not push for a move. If it gets to the end of July, beginning of August, and they've not done enough, and they've wasted another 2 months of summer trying to get £3 million shaved off here and £500,000 shaved off there and an extra $2 million on the price for this one we're trying to get rid of, I think Kane will just say, that's it, forget it, I'm out of here as well. So they've got to satisfy both Conte and Kane. But if they do so, then you know that they're going to look like a harmonious squad with one unified sense of purpose, which is what they wanted all along. Big if, though.
Is that sense of purpose going to arrive on time for them to grab that top 4 spot? Obviously, Saturday is a hugely important juncture.
I think it's going to be difficult. I would say if they get 9 wins out of 12, that's 72 points, and that'll probably be enough. If you look at the fixtures, everyone's got to play each other. So Spurs have got to play Arsenal, West Ham, United. Arsenal have got to play United and West Ham. United have got to play, obviously, those two, plus Liverpool again. Spurs and Arsenal have both got to play Liverpool. United have got to play Chelsea. Arsenal have got to play Chelsea. There's a lot of games where points can be won and lost all over the place. If Spurs were to win if Spurs were to win on Saturday, that would give them real momentum, because you probably think that would kill off United's realistic hopes because they played so many more games than the rest. It would then, you'd think, become a shootout between Spurs and Arsenal, and that rearranged match, which will be, I suspect, in that sort of second or third midweek in May, in that catch-up midweek window that the Premier League keep available, could end up being pivotal, but it actually could be decisive. I still think Arsenal just might shade it, but 12 games is a third of a season. It's a long, long way. And Tottenham look more cohesive now than at any point in the season.
It's going to be a very, very interesting race. There's one last thing I wanted to just flag. You're writing today in the paper about the Premier League and the presentation that they got around NFTs. It sounded like your instinct is that the Premier League are going to go and sell NFTs, but there were some dissenting voices who were wondering, is this a bit of a pyramid scheme?
Yeah, I think there's genuinely, this is why there was a 4-hour meeting of which 3 3/4 hours was taken up with NFT. That shows you how significant the issue is. I know that some clubs think gung-ho, we've got to do this. It's brilliant. It's a you've got to do it. We can't not do it. No brainer. We've got to move ahead. Others are saying, well, what is it? How does it work? Can you reassure us that this is actually a viable concept? And there's another group who are saying, yeah, we understand that, but this isn't morally right. We're taking liberties. Now, I know that football clubs, particularly Premier League clubs, don't tend to take moral stances, but they have done over Ukraine over the last couple of weeks in a way that I wouldn't have imagined. And even clubs that have, shall we say, debatable owners have joined completely and totally in with this stance on Ukraine. I think it's more likely than not they are going to go for it. I would say 80% realistically. But I'd be surprised if it's agreed before the summer meeting. It might be done by the end of the month. There's 2 more Premier League meetings coming up this month, and one of those will basically be an NFT meeting. The other will be a strategic review meeting, which is only 18 months overdue. So it appears to be heading in that direction, but there are doubts. There is questioning. There are those who are reluctant to commit. And part of it is they've seen what's happened with some of the other NFTs that have disappeared. I'm reading today that the John Terry one has dropped 90% in value. It doesn't mean it won't bounce back. And if you look at crypto, it's gone up and down. Bitcoin value has oscillated wildly. Like the stock market, goes down 3%, goes up 4% over the last few days. So we've seen that in other fields. But I do think there's a direction of travel there. I'm not entirely sold it's a great idea myself, but I'm old and past it and don't quite understand. Although it was explained to me that theoretically you could own, say, the Aguero goal on your machine, on your laptop, on your smartphone, or if you wanted to, on a little iPad you display on your wall at house and show all your mates, look, that's I own that goal. But you don't own it outside of those specific NFT rights. I mean, you can't stop Sky showing it again.
No.
And anyone else can show it from YouTube.
Yeah.
So you don't own it, but you do own it. It's very odd.
I was going to ask, which Premier League NFT are you most looking forward to spending your sweet Ethereum on?
Oh, there's been some big ones, I think. I've won an absolute howler, actually, to sum up football. I just some ridiculous moment that was worth laughing at. And there's been a few of those. Unfortunately, too many of them involve Spurs' defence, but let's not go too deeply into that.
Martin, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Martin Lipton from The Sun there, giving us some insight into that. I think I'm not sceptical about the power of blockchain or its benefits, but certainly this part of it.
Yeah, people have just got too much crypto. They don't know what to do with it. Is possibly my take on all of it.
You're an Ethereum stan, are you? Is that?
No. I'm not a stan of any of these things. To be honest, it does. I agree to a point about crypto, and there's definitely a whole subset of things that are allegedly going to be useful in the real world in the not too distant future. Whether or not that is going to be the case with NFTs, I'm not quite sure. And I was pining all my hopes on John Terry and his business model. John
Terry's apes. Who knew that would just be a house of cards?
John Terry investing in Bored Apes was like John Duggan and virtual insanity. I would just follow the smartest man in the room, and unfortunately John Terry has let me down big time here, so there will be no Bored Apes for the kids this Christmas.
At 8:41 it's time for the papers.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Emma, come on, don't be, no, I'm not,
yes.
No.
You can't say that. You can't say that. The OTB brief is our lead story on the website at the moment. All positive feeling in English rugby is wrapped around Marcus Smith. This was Wednesday Night Rugby this week. Official Stephen Kenny signs new Republic of Ireland contract. Peter Dooley swaps Leinster for Connacht, says he wants more game time. He's 27. Plenty of time for him to make it as a top tier prop as well. The best scenario for Pochettino is Madrid this summer. That was yesterday's show, Graham talking to us. It's going to be interesting to see if what happened last night significantly alters the outcome in that.
Yeah, one of the other interesting nuggets from Graham's piece yesterday was he described the refereeing as a robust North European style, and so it proved.
Yeah.
I mean, Benzema bouncing off Donnarumma.
And this is the Bernabeu, strange things happen.
Yeah, he did. He was pretty on the money, to be fair.
I thought that meant that maybe some of the refereeing decisions would be dodgy. Were all the offsides offside? Definitely. There's one I didn't see a replay of.
Which one? On the PSG side?
Yeah.
No, I think they were.
Okay.
Weren't they?
There was no controversy about it.
And certainly the one, certainly Hakimi played Benzema onside for the second or third goal. I can't remember.
This is too far. It's the back of the Times. It's a picture. Owen Slott's writing today about how Eddie Jones must learn from the Irish. England far behind Farrell's team in terms of total rugby. I see what you're doing there, Owen. You're telling everybody that we've got the better coach, and look, he happens to be English, and so therefore, screw this Razzie to England after the next World Cup. It's like, come and get Andy Farrell, but hands off. Hands off. We're going to give Andy Farrell a job for life after he wins the World Cup for us, right? That's what that's going to be.
Yeah.
But the picture is of Tadhg Furlong, and it's one of those, not quite no look, but it's one of those passes where his hand position doesn't look like, if you were to do a spot the ball with his hand position there, you would never get it, right? It actually reminds me a little bit of Matt Williams' description of Shane Warne's little finger that we had on the show the other morning, where the ball comes out over the back of his little finger, and he actually had a ball to show what it was like. It looks like, I'm not saying he has Shane Warne's ball skills, but like under the
Both of them are pretty
circumstances where there are other 120 kilo men trying to smash you, his ball handling skills are absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, he is. He's absolutely sensational.
Would you say he's part of the best front row in the world, Owen? Would you say he's part of the best front row in the world?
Interesting. So give me the kind of the influences behind that accent first of all before I answer.
It's made up.
I think everybody just got to put in the word starting.
You'd say he's the starting best front row in the world. The whole three.
The best. Do I have to talk back in that accent? Best starting tight head in the world, right?
Oh, he is definitely he is world class. There's no doubt about that. That means if you're picking a team of the best players in the world, he's your tight head.
So one third of the take is definitely correct.
They're 1/3 of the best starting front row in the world, aren't they?
All right, Hugo.
8:44 this morning. A friend of mine did say that his kids were doing 2 sports recently. The under sevens, maybe under sixes, whatever, and one's GAA, and one is rugby, and there was like 5 Hugos, and there was none in the GAA. I don't know what that says. I don't think it says anything. I don't think there's no comment. There's no hot take there.
I would say that the way like they have like these congregations of like say ginger people or people named with the same name. The world's biggest convention of people named Hugo is Ireland against France in rugby union. Hugo and Ugo everywhere you look.
Ugo Uge. 8:45 this morning. Colm Boyle is with us. Colm, good morning to you.
Good morning, lads. How are we?
We're good. We're a bit giddy.
Yeah, I can sense it. Interesting case study that would be, Owen.
Yeah, I mean, I was just hoping for you to come in with
that's
sort
worth
of Hugo-esque accent.
some financing for a scholarship or something like that.
I think so.
But
what's going on?
Well, lots going on. You've been talking about the Champions League last night. Paris Saint-Germain crashed out of the competition. They surrendered a 2-0 aggregate lead to lose 3-2 to Real Madrid in their last 16. Karim Benzema scoring a hat-trick there for the winners to give them a 3-1 win on the night. Elsewhere, Manchester City confirmed their quarter-final place following a 0-0 draw with Sporting. Pep Guardiola's side advanced 5-0 on aggregate. Premier League action tonight. Jesse Marsh takes charge of Leeds for the first time at Ellen Road. They host Aston Villa from 8:45. 3 games underway from 7:30. Bottom side Norwich take on Chelsea. Wolves play Watford, and Southampton welcome Newcastle to St Mary's. So all those games pretty important in terms of the bottom 5 places in the table. West Ham, meanwhile, travel to Sevilla. That's in the first leg of their Europa League last 16 tie tonight. Their Spanish opponents, of course, have won that competition a record 6 times. The Scottish champions Rangers, they beat Borussia Dortmund pretty impressively in the last round. They're at home to Red Star Belgrade, and in the Conference League tonight, it's Leicester versus Rennes. The Ireland rugby team for Saturday's game against England will be named later on today. Johnny Sexton could be in line to return to the team for the game at Twickenham on Saturday, and as I say, head coach Andy Farrell will name a starting side later this morning. In some golf news this morning, some live golf news actually, Leona Maguire is 7 shots off the lead on 2 under par. That's after her first round at the Honda LPGA in Thailand. The 3 players shared the lead there on 9 under. Maguire carded 2 birdies and 16 pars in her bogey-free round of 70 this morning. Meanwhile, Rory McIlroy is confident he can challenge at the Players' Championship when it gets underway later. The Down natives in the field alongside Shane Lowry and Seamus Power at TPC Sawgrass. The first players are due out on course there shortly before 12 noon Irish time. And last night, an emotional Tiger Woods paid tribute to his family and team as he was inducted into the World Golf Hall of Fame. The 15-time major champion was introduced by his 14-year-old daughter Sam, who described the scary moments after her father's car crash last year that left him with serious injuries. In tennis news this morning, Novak Djokovic has confirmed he won't play in the Indian Wells tournament due to his coronavirus vaccine status. The 20-time Grand Slam champion has not had the jab, meaning rules prevent him from entering the United States, and he's also set to miss the Miami Open. And finally, there's racing at Thurles this afternoon, lads. The first they're going to post at 10 to 2.
The probables team, or the possibles team rather, that Jerry Thornley had in the Irish Times was interesting. Peter O'Mahony's starting in his team. Cian Healy was starting, and obviously Sexton's starting, so there's no doubt about that. But what do we think is going to happen? Who's going to start?
Yeah, well, Sexton's definitely going to start, I think. Healy probably into the front row, you would think, and then obviously Ian Henderson, does he come back in?
Henderson's on the bench,
Yeah.
so it's Byrne and Ryan starting. O'Mahony, Van der Fleer, and Caelan Doris is at 8, which means that Jack Conan is on the bench. And Bundy Aki starts.
The wingers?
The wingers are Andrew Conway and James Lowe. So Mac Hansen gets dropped.
Yeah.
He's gone back to November for his winger, so that's the Peter O'Mahony thing there is the the big storyline, especially if he's suggesting that Jack Conan's going to be on the bench. He hasn't necessarily heard that there is an additional injury in the back row. Like Conan, Doris, Van der Fleer, you go with your best back row for this England match. So something's obviously changed, it seems, or else there's something specific about Peter O'Mahony that he sees in him this weekend. Like it does feel that, I mean,
he thinks that so Doris played 8 against Italy, and that Conan came off after 52 minutes in Paris, and so therefore that was
O'Mahony's
actually
your next best 6.
Yeah,
fair enough. I guess if that's the logic behind it. And I do think that there's been maybe a little bit of a rush to arrive at the point that Peter O'Mahony has nothing to give to Ireland anymore.
I don't think, guys, we're definitely not there. Like, no. you have him around the squad, definitely on the bench and potentially starting games like this, and no one bats an eyelid. Like,
yeah, I think so. And I guess the question around it has been that we've got such an amount of depth in the Ireland back row at the moment that there is bound to be a better option, but I'm not sure if that's the case at the present. Maybe it will be come World Cup, but it seems that himself and Conor Murray have both been thrown into this position now where it's like they're fighting for their position in the match day 23 every week. And
who is the captain if Sexton goes off then? Is it automatically still James Ryan? Is that the plan? Or when Peter O'Mahony's out there, no, I'm captain?
Good question. Presume it's Ryan, considering he's been there already this season. Does that make him, is he technically vice captain, or do they have vice captains?
I don't know. It's a leadership group, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I suppose the experience factor. There's been a lot of talk, I think, about the crowd and the atmosphere in Twickenham, hasn't there, before this game? More so than any other matches that I can remember in Twickenham, in terms of size and the crowd and the factor that it's going to be, I suppose, with a full stadium. O'Mahony obviously has vast experience, so maybe that's going to play into things if he is selected in the starting team. But Owen's right in terms of the depth at Ireland that they have going to Twickenham now. You know, you would be relatively confident, I think. Famous last words, but hopefully that they can put in a performance.
It does feel a little bit like we've got to a point where we're expecting a win at the weekend, which is it's just such a dangerous thing when you look at the history of Ireland in Twickenham. But you're showing your arms.
This team's not a very good England team. They're not that interested in this game. They're more interested in the World Cup. We have to go and win.
Yeah, you're throwing your arms.
We're picking our best team. They're not picking their best team.
Like I know that, but I do think that
if we lose to this team,
I wonder, is there still a bit of 2018 hype, which I was as guilty of more than anybody else.
Post 2018 hype.
Post 2018 hype that we're still kind of feeding into here.
But you not remember we went to Twickenham and we absolutely killed them to win the Grand Slam, and it was never in doubt. And in the build up to that, it was like, this isn't the best England team. They were missing Tuilagi that day. They were missing both the Vinopolas that day. Like, there's a style of England that beats us.
Yeah.
And this is not that style of England.
They can't do it with the players that they have, but the players that they do have are still a very good team. They're not a great team that's going to possibly get to a World Cup final next year. Now, I do think, in fairness, I mean, Eddie Jones is probably looking at next year's World Cup draw and saying to himself, well, this is a winnable tournament, or is it one where he can get to a final? Whereas we, on the other hand, look at the Ireland draw and say to ourselves, well, I mean, even if they're flying, there's every chance they lose the exact same stage.
Yeah. But no, I think Ger's right that we do have to go there with a certain degree of confidence to try and win the game, obviously. And England probably are at a different stage of their development, as you say, in terms of looking towards the World Cup next year. But from Ireland's point of view, I mean, performance is absolutely key here, and it will be a big statement to go there and win and set you up nicely for the last round, obviously. And obviously, if Wales could do us a favour on Friday night as well, it set things up really, really nicely.
All right, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It is 8:52 this morning. The Hurling Pod with Paul Murphy, James Scahill and Will O'Callaghan will be available every Monday across the course of the season. It's been a dramatic few weeks in the hurling leagues. We kind of expected the leagues to tip away nicely and not have too many storylines, but it's full of storylines. Some very interesting stuff from Neil McMahon talking about the Ulster Hurling Championship this week. It was the BBC's GAA podcast. He was talking about it and just basically saying the Ulster Council, it's their fault that there is no Ulster Hurling Championship. And I don't know, I think it feels a little bit like hurling in the middle tier counties is undergone something of a renaissance when it comes to attention, partly because of the characters involved, like on the field and off the field. And I don't know, it feels like if they all just got together and decided, no, we're going on strike unless you actually fix this, or we're going to do something radical unless we get help, that there's an opportunity there for them right now to seize the day. But anyway, we'll come back to that, because obviously Limerick are the A story in all of this. Here's Paul Murphy and why he is actually a little bit worried about Limerick's 2022 form.
You know, seeing them in the All-Ireland final last year, you were just saying there's so many questions for teams to answer here before you have a chance to take a scalp off Limerick. But like what James is saying there, I think they're flatlining a small bit. Seamus Flanagan did an interview a few years ago, and he stated that Limerick work harder than everyone else, and that's why and I agree with him. Like, they do work harder, and they're so intense in how they play. And even I saw Tom Condon over the weekend. He was saying that Paul Kinnerk, when he's training them, he believes that they train at 120%, so that whatever that is, so that when it comes to a match, you've actually trained harder. And I know a lot of coaches would believe that, but at the moment, that doesn't seem to be what's happening. I mean, they're being outworked, and that's the bottom line. And if they're priding themselves on the work rate, the one thing, and I think it's one thing that John Kiley will be looking for, kind of going, okay, lads, I don't mind if there's lads hitting wides here. I don't mind, any of those things, or lads making the odd mistake. But being outworked is an attitude. That's, if you're being outworked, it's not because things didn't go your way. You can always run hard for a ball. You can always put in a tackle. You can always track back. You can always support. Okay, if you don't raise a ball, or you don't put a ball over the bar, that comes down to the skill, and that's not an attitude problem. That's just maybe in confidence, whatever. But they're being outworked. I saw several instances as well where players were being isolated, which is not a thing we associate with Limerick. A player would get a ball out, Colin Coughlin be out in the wing, he gets a ball into the hand, hit by 3 Clare players, and then he can't get a pass away because there's no one necessarily there supporting. That's something we've seen, and I think it's something teams are looking at now. Probably the 2 things teams are bringing to the Limerick, when they're playing Limerick, is one, hit them before they get their heads up. So if they get a ball into their hand, there has to be lads hitting them. And then the second one then is, as we've seen at Argylan, get under their skin, poke at them, whatever. And we do see even players, I suppose, players getting the dig, and another fellow wouldn't go down, but some players are going down and highlighting it to referee. And that's what's, to me, that's saying that, the plan is there to get under Limerick's skin. Limerick are buying it. So every team is going to just keep doing it. And if you have to sell it to the referee a little bit, as teams are kind of doing, they're doing it. But they're, for me, the 2 things that we're seeing with Limerick at the moment. They're being a little bit outworked, and teams are getting under their skin. So it's just, they have to look at that and see how they're going to address it.
It seems fixable. It seems like it's the type of thing that Limerick, it's a league campaign. It's not that important to them in the grand scheme of things, really, because they know exactly what it takes to win All Ireland. So, fixable.
Yeah, it also feels that like the game is a little bit different between the league and the championship, let alone the standards of teams. Like, I remember last year, and I'll admit that, we got a bit carried away with the standard of hurling in the league at the start of last year, especially when it came to a lot of long-range free-taking, that it just became a sense of who can score the longest free, and that was it. And come to summer, I felt that didn't matter at all. It does feel the game
was totally different.
Yeah, completely different. Yeah. And it's like, not only are Limerick going to be better, but the game is going to be different.
Totally. And you might be allowed to throw the ball again in the summertime. You can search for the Hurling Pod, hit subscribe in its own podcast feed. That's the fastest way to get it. Or you can get it on OTB GA every Monday. You'll get all of our GA there across OTB AM and Off the Ball, including the football pod with Paddy Andrews and James O'Donoghue on Tuesdays from 6 a.m. They meet up at midnight on Monday night, and they start recording, and they don't stop until 6 a.m. So it's 6 hours of Paddy Andrews and James O'Donoghue and Tommy Rooney goodness coming your way. Will, good morning to you.
Morning, lads. How you getting on?
Your recording schedule isn't quite so punishing, but you are available every Monday.
Yeah, we're a little bit more casual. We kind of record when the guys finish work on a Monday afternoon, get the podcast out hopefully around 6 or 7 o'clock, depending on how long we blather on for during the podcast itself. And then we premiere on YouTube at around about noon on Tuesday as well. Tommy,
obviously, probably really should have been a midfielder, but decided that he wanted to be the glory with the collar up, full forward. Eric Cantona / Beckham always going on about boots. He definitely fancies himself as a fancy Dan forward. You have decided that your podcast is going to be a goalkeeper and a teak tough cornerback who, basically won an All-Star every year for the first 3 or 4 years that he came along. So what does this speak to about your character?
I think it speaks to the fact that I ended up getting stuck in goals a lot when I hurled Ger for a start. I kind of played full forward at the start, and then slowly but surely, as your skills aren't that useful outfield, you get graduated into goals to try and just stop the ball going in and pucking the ball out. So myself and Skehill are kind of kindred spirits in that regard. And the good thing about having 2 defenders on, as we spoke about in this week's pod, is they will tell you about the dark arts and the fact that Skehill Says if he was going in against Limerick currently, given that they've had 3 red cards in their first 4 games and that some of their players have reacted to provoking from other players, he says he would do everything possible. He would talk about players' girlfriends and rumours about them into their ear while he's marking them playing for Limerick, to do anything possible to try and get them sent off. Now, Paul Murphy, to his credit, was the complete opposite. We've got the devil on one side and we've got an angel on the other. He said he never sledged against a player, and that sledging is for football as opposed to for hurling. So he said always it was a case of being more physically prepared than the players around you and just mark them tight. He also gave the insight that 2 of the best players of all time, attacking wise, and Seamus Callan and Joe Canning, don't talk to their markers at all during the game. He was saying there are 2 players who never get up in your face. They never kind of over celebrate when they've scored a point, because he reckons you're only going to inspire your marker if you actually do that. It's often counterproductive.
Yeah, and it's a completely different skill set. Just because you're a great hurler doesn't mean you can talk shit good. You know, like, I mean, you come across as like Charlie Nicholas. Like, yeah, well, you should have gone to Specsavers, just chef on the way onto the game. So it's a skill, and I'd like to think that anybody who does it like stands in front of the mirror for a while and like chat shit for a while and they actually figure it out. Style. Yeah, it's the only. Yeah. It's the only way.
I've no doubt it happens. And again, Paul was commenting on the fact that in hurling it's slightly different to football, where your marker, it happens from time to time, but it's unlikely your marker is going to score up the other end. But defenders will often do that in hurling. If it's a wing back or a cornerback, they'll go on a run and put it over from 80 yards out. And he was saying Jerry Elwood was one of those where he was getting crap from his marker one day. Next thing he did, he just flattened him, went up, put the ball over the bar. I think people remember the Rock doing that once upon a time as well, breaking out from full back, hits a couple of men and then bangs it over from pretty much his own 45. So in hurling, you can actually punish an attacker who's doing their best to wind you up as well. So that's all within the conversation in the hurling pod this week. And the lads definitely feel that Limerick can be got at. And the more that this ends up in the commentary after games, that Limerick have had a red card or this decision has happened and John Kiley's questioning a second yellow card or a red card, there's going to be that feeling that Limerick can be got at as the year goes on as well.
I felt that last year, though, because they had a similar fractured. Every game there was like a pitched battle, physically and metaphorically, and then come the championship. And I don't know if everybody has completely forgotten the Tipperary game. What would have happened if that crowd was full that day, right? I looking back on it, there are some people at the game, but I think it's like 30% capacity, or it feels like it's 30%, if even. And so it's quite spread out. But the game looks over at half time. I think it's 2-13 to 9 points or something, or 10 points. It's like, well, it's going to be very difficult for them to come back from this. Glance should have been sent off. What's going to happen? And then they put together possibly the greatest 35 minutes of hurling you're ever going to see.
Yeah, like it definitely felt that Sheedy was maybe trying to maybe make up for a lack of crowd. And there's the sort of impassioned plea to his players, get out there and keep this thing going. And that was at half time.
On the field.
On the fields. That was, or was that the water break? Will might have a better recollection.
I think it's half time.
It was half time. It was definitely something that we saw on the field, and maybe even in his head it was a sense of, right, okay, this is a very interesting position that we're in. Got to do everything here to ensure that we keep doing this. And maybe deep down he knew what was going to come in the second half.
Yeah, it felt that day as if they were on the ropes as well. And then, as Ger mentioned, they put in a most stunning second half performance, which they weren't quite able to do in 2019 when they were hit hard in a similar way by Kilkenny in a semi-final, where they were almost left with too much to do in the second half. And yet this Limerick team found a way to get back to a very controversial decision at the end, where that game could have went extra time. So that's like, that has to be a thing if you're a Limerick supporter you would take heart from right now. First 4 games of the league, they're the lowest scorers in the top 2 flights in Division 1A and Division 1B. They're only averaging 16 scores a game at the moment, which is so un-Limerick-like. And we thought last week it was going to click back in because you had 7 or 8 of the frontline players coming in to start. It's definitely the strongest starting 15 that they've used in the league so far. And yet Clare probably should have beaten them in Ennis. Limerick were probably lucky enough to get out with a point. The joy of it is for Limerick, and this is where I'll bemoan the structures of the National Hurling League, and Malky Clerkin wrote very well about it in the Irish Times last weekend on Saturday, is that there's minimal danger for Limerick. They just have to avoid defeat against an Offaly team who've taken heavy enough beatings from everybody so far, and they're not in the relegation playoff. And even if they do drop into it, it's a one-off game at a neutral venue against Antrim. So the chances of Limerick being relegated are almost minimal by comparison to, say, a football team in Division 1, where if they have a bad start and play poorly in their first 4 games, they're almost certainly going to Division 2.
And the football teams aren't going into another league in a couple of weeks' time. So, like, you compound that with the thing that you just mentioned there, Will, and it just makes the hurling league a little bit unsatisfying. But at the same time, all these storylines are here.
Yeah, but it's good. Maybe it's good because we actually get to know a good bit more about these teams and the characters involved, and we get to do a bit more of a deep dive as opposed to the smack bang. Okay, this is really like the Munster those Munster games, a very good team we won't see in a quarter-final this year, like at this stage. Or potentially the best hurler in the country we won't see if Clare don't make it.
Yeah, like I think there's interesting stories going into both of the round robins, in that Munster looks like it's shaping up to be ridiculously competitive at the top because of the way the Cork and Waterford have been playing. And you could argue at this stage that Waterford have maybe got the most complete looking panel. Like when I see Jack Fagan, who was a star ball winning forward for the last couple of seasons, playing at wing back for Waterford currently, and that's before Waterford get Jamie Byrne back to full fitness and back into the team. The Mahoney's coming back in after Ballygunner. They seem all of a sudden, with the way they've played and with the very intense conditioning, we saw the way they blew Tipperary away in the final quarter at the weekend, that Waterford now look like a really strong team going into championship, that they're in a really good place. Like we spoke last week about the fact that, you know, Cork followed it up with the win against Galway at the weekend, where Cork have started the season flying as well, that if they can bring that form in, there's no reason to think they can't beat Limerick in the first round of the Munster Championship. And next thing, Cork are then well placed to qualify, and Limerick are almost up against the 8 ball after the first round to get out of Munster, such is the competition that's there. And then in Leinster, I defy anybody who can call who's going to win the Leinster Championship or get to the final at this stage, because Dublin had looked really impressive, came off the back of winning at Semple Stadium, and then got blown away by Kilkenny, who won by 13 points on Saturday at Parnell Park. Now, there'll be plenty who'll feel that's the real Dublin, that maybe we're getting a fake impression of Dublin in the first 3 games, and then when Dublin go to a big game and the pressure is put on them, they revert back to being a little bit flaky like they were against Cork last year. Or maybe is it an off night for Dublin? And then you get Kilkenny, who've kind of slowly built and still have got some key players to come back in, most notably, of course, TJ Reid when he gets back from his honeymoon, to add in that little bit of star power into their forward line. It becomes very, very difficult to work out what the established order is in Leinster right now.
I don't know if you detected a little note of excitement in Tommy Walsh's voice when he was talking to Joe during the week about the spine of the team and the quality of players that they're getting, and the fact that some of the players coming into the team have been playing in clubs that are playing very progressive hurling, which is kind of keep ball possession, and they're ready to go for the new style, and that maybe Cody's building a new team again. I mean, it would be ridiculous if he was able to pull that off. Like anything.
I'm sure Cody is delighted as well, Jared, that all the conversation now is about how Cork and Wexford are going, the fact that Limerick are having their struggles. Kilkenny have still won 3 games out of 4. They won the games they were expected to win and then beat Dublin at Parnell Park. They've got a perfect setup this weekend or the weekend to come, because they play against Waterford at home with a chance to beat Waterford and potentially qualify for the semi-finals of the league. I don't think Kilkenny would be too disappointed if they didn't qualify, but they want to beat Waterford at home in any game, in any competition. And slowly but surely, some of the players they've blooded start to look really impressive. Like Blanchfield looks like a real find at wing-back this year. I think he's been brilliant in the games that I've watched Kilkenny on the TV. And they've just gone about their business very, very nicely. And I thought last week, watched the game against Dublin, they mix it up well. As Tommy says, they're able to introduce a bit of a transition with the way that they're passing the ball around. At the same time, they've got the athleticism and the power like they had with Walter Walsh for his goal at the weekend. And that's a fairly potent mix that Kilkenny have coming together. And we very quickly forget they're the back-to-back Leinster champions going into this season.
Can I just say as well, it would be remarkable if Cody did get one more All-Ireland, given what he potentially has to work with. Like, I'm not sure if Kilkenny are doing more to bring those players through who don't make the grade at underage level, but like the fact is that they haven't won an All-Ireland minor title since 2014 and under 21/under 20 since 2008. That they haven't had underage success at all over the last 8 years. They haven't got a title. Whereas you look at Cork and Limerick and how they've managed to, well, we expect Cork to build on underage success. Limerick have already done so. And Kilkenny, if you're just judging it on underage titles, haven't got the same bedrock of players. So if Cody was to turn around another All-Ireland in that context, I think he'd deserve a hell of a lot of credit.
He really would, because this one feels more like a rebuild than some of the rebuilds previously. Like going from the team that almost went 5 in a row, it was a case of only having to find a few players here and there and kind of slowly but surely reintroducing stars into the team. And like TJ Reid was there ready to take over from Shefflin once Shefflin retired. This time round, this feels like a proper rebuild, even since 2019. And you're right to point out that the underage success has been elsewhere. Galway, Cork, particularly in recent years, have had a production line of teams who've been going to All-Ireland finals and winning competitions.
Yeah.
Kilkenny just haven't had that.
You ask Sehel, though, about the value of all those underage All-Irelands for Galway perspective, and it doesn't automatically follow that the team that wins, like you might be as well having a team that suffers a defeat in an All-Ireland final or an All-Ireland semi-final where 2 of the players are actually going to be truly great players who make it and have 10-year careers at senior level.
Yeah, like I agree with that to a point. I also think though that the under-20s had become like a really good barometer. Maybe minor you can forget, but like, I mean, you look at Limerick 2015 and 2017 All-Ireland champions at under-21 level, and look at them now, and I think that's been a really good
Limerick
barometer.
obviously put a massive investment in, and they took over the city back from rugby, and all that kind of stuff was happening at the same time that brought that success, as opposed to it being something that kind of came out of nothing and then they used that as...
Yeah, I get that, but at the same time, like Kilkenny, 3 under-21 All-Irelands in the 90s, 4 under-21 All-Irelands in the 2000s. They haven't won anything since 2008, as I say, at under-20s level. I do think it counts for something. Again, minor you can maybe take or leave, but at that level, especially with hurling, I think it's quite telling.
All right, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Will, good stuff, thanks very much for that. More from the hurling pod through Will and the lads every Monday morning. Here's what we've got on OTB Sports Radio today. At 1 o'clock, OTB Gold is Barry Ryan, The Ascent. Leaders' questions from 3. Our retro panel is The Competitive Obsession at 4. Chris Herron interview is OTB Gold tonight, the story of the guy who got drafted by the Celtics and ended up a heroin addict. It's an incredible story, and a story of recovery as well. So it's a positive story in the end. And then the show tonight live, it's Thursday, it means John Giles and plenty more with Nathan from 7 o'clock this evening. Up next, we're looking at this weekend's Gaelic football with former Mayo star Colm Boyle.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
I don't think goalkeepers should be taking penalties. I think it's too much to ask of them. They're not outfield players. They're doing the stuff to save the penalties.
So I rang my agent. He's in the hotel room next door. So you tried to give me 3.5 years there, not 2.5. He's like, no. I was like, go through the contract, please. I want to get an extra year here. He's like, hold on, I'll ring you back. He rings me back and he's like, I can't believe they say nothing to nobody.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Shane Walsh is their most talented footballer, like hands down one of the most talented footballers in the country. When you see what he did at the weekend to Cork, and he left Matty Taylor for dust, as we saw, and buried that goal, it was just awesome to watch. And he's done things like that, freakishly impressive things on a Gaelic football pitch, but maybe just not consistently enough. Do you think that Cian O'Neill will go in and be able to positively influence Shane Walsh's career and bring him on to that next level that he needs to get to?
I do. I think that Cian would have gone in there with that in mind, with Shane Walsh in mind even, and trying to get an extra bit out of him. And he enjoys taking on kind of the big players and the big personalities and trying to drag more out of them. Do you know? I think that Shane Walsh will have got a boost out of Cian going in there.
Okay.
But through the grapevine, I heard over the last year or two that training in Galway wasn't spectacular. So it did need to go in there.
Who's called you? Name names.
Jimmy's sources, episode 1. Who's your sources, Jimmy? Can't reveal them.
Joyce's got me looking for you, Jimmy.
Mayo fella told me. But like you can have the best players in the world. If the training is not absolutely exceptional, you mightn't get there at all. Do you know?
That's really interesting. And obviously, James, I don't know personal experience of Cian O'Neill's training regime and what it was like, and to hear the impact that it might have on Galway, that would be worrying for everybody else.
Yeah, like he's obviously somebody who's got a whole wealth of experience working with a range of different teams over the last little while. I do think that maybe the way Kildare went made, I guess, lowered his stock a little bit, and Galway are taking fine advantage of it at the moment. I'm not necessarily sure if it's a situation where he's better as a behind the scenes person involved in a setup, or as a manager. It might well have just been a situation where he didn't have the players or didn't have the right setup at Kildare to succeed. So I think the jury's still out on that a little bit, but I think Galway probably spotted what he had done behind the scenes, especially with Kerry over the last few years, and thought, right, we can get someone in here who'll really contribute positively. So I think it's a bit of a steal.
Well, I mean, if he has the same impact he's had in various other places, people forget that he was with Tip Hurlers. That's where I think that was the first inter-county job, was it?
I think so. And then Mayo, right?
Mayo, yeah. And then Kerry, and then
the Kildare job, wasn't it? And then Cork for a bit. Galway. So he's obviously based in CIT, so that made the Cork situation work. So Yeah, like, I mean, he's definitely one of the more notable coaches here. It's interesting that himself and Stephen Rochford are probably two of the more notable people who've gone from front of house to behind the scenes, in inverted commas, over the last little while. That they were obviously maybe recognised their own skill set better than anybody else.
Yeah, okay, so that was this week's episode of the Football Pod, episode 7 of season 2. You can listen to it right now and every Tuesday across the OTB podcast network. The fixtures this weekend: Armagh against Kildare there you go. Yeah, Armagh against Kildare is tomorrow at 6. Sorry, this is not Friday. I am very giddy. This is Thursday. It is on Saturday at 6. And then Kerry and Mayo is in Austin Stack Park. You going to that?
Yeah, 7:30 on Saturday night, isn't it?
7:30 Saturday night. And then obviously the Dubs are playing on Sunday against Tyrone in Omagh, knowing they'll know the result of the Kildare Armagh game, which, let's face it, Armagh are favourites for, so they should win that. Armagh, supposedly the third best team in the division. You would make them strong favourites to win that game.
Still watching, it's only on if I get a geo block, I'll be watching it, but I'm interested in the results. I don't think any of those games this weekend are kind of like are gimmies. Sorry, and I think Kildare proven with the win the last day that that's not going to be the case against Armagh, who maybe come off a little bit after their early form at the start of the league.
All right, Colm Boyle is with us this morning. Colm, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
All right, lads, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining us. We were talking there about the impact that Cian O'Neill might have on Galway. James O'Donoghue was saying that he thinks it could be a shot in the arm for the training coming out of Galway, and that somebody like Shane Walsh in particular might benefit from his influence. You would have personal experience of the impact that he might have on a setup. Is that something that Galway might have been missing and therefore might be a bit of a game changer for them? Where
the answer is yes.
Yeah, that was one of those the voice things that. Who had one of those famous things? What's the most famous pop culture version of one of those?
Darth Vader.
Oh, Darth Vader. Anyway, somebody will tell us. Just a bit of problem with the Skype line there. So.
Yeah. Sorry. So the fixtures, you were going through them for the weekend. Yeah. So are you not legitimately
the Kieran McGeeney derby?
For Kildare at the weekend. I know obviously you saw up close and personal how good McGeeney can be as a manager, but Kildare are riding a wave at the moment. I don't think Armagh are as heavy favourites as you might think.
Well, they're 2-point favourites, and I'm obviously hyping the shite out of them. Just
you've learned a lot. You're good at yearning, I guess.
Kildare Mafia is finally being born here.
Yeah.
I'm just following in your footsteps, Owen.
That's okay.
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, there is no mafia, of course, we should state.
Well, obviously, the denial of the existence is the first rule of Fight Club.
Yeah.
So then on Sundays, it's Donegal Monaghan in Ballybuffet, and then Tyrone versus Dublin. The way the games are staggered actually works out really well for Dublin, so they'll know exactly what they need to do in terms of relegation and stuff like that. But again, I don't think it matters. Piece with Paul Beelan in the paper yesterday, I think Paul Keane wrote it, where he was talking with Beelan, and Beelan had forgotten that Dublin had been relegated in 95 before they went on to win the All-Ireland. It's like, that's a good point, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't. I guess did Donegal do something similar in 92 as well?
I don't know.
Getting relegated or at least winning it from the second tier. I might be completely wrong on that one. Or maybe it was actually 2012 that actually happened in. But it's rare, and the times it's happened have been memorable because it's rare. And I think that maybe the league has gained in importance a little bit over the last 10 years in particular, where getting relegated does dent your chances a little bit. But it's all about context. And as we said yesterday, I mean, the context of Mayo, for example, being in Division 2 was that they could turn it into a real positive because they were trying to bring through a whole new generation of players, and that accelerated the transition that James Horan instilled, and the transition is almost complete now at this point. Dublin are going through the exact same thing, so I'm not sure if they'll have the same level of quality in terms of youngsters to bring through when they're in Division 2, if they're in Division 2 next year. But if they do, then that's a brilliant hunting ground for them.
Yeah, exactly. So Colm Boyle is with us now, I think. Colm, good morning to you.
Good morning, lads. How are you?
Yeah, no, loud and clear. We were talking about Cian O'Neill. We'll talk about the Dubs in a moment if we've got time at the end. But what kind of an impact do you think he could have in Galway?
I think Jane spoke about it very well during the week there. He will bring a level of professionalism to them. There's no doubt about that. He's huge experience, even since he's been with us. So we had him for a year, obviously, in 2012. and he moved on to Kerry then after that. So even since he would have been in with us in 2012, I'm sure he's developed further on, and he's gained even more and more experience. And when I was kind of thinking about it during the week, I suppose when he came in and took us in 2012, probably fairly similar scenario to the Galway team now was in. We would have had a mix of youth and experience and kind of older lads like possibly Damien Comer now and Shane Walsh, who are really looking to push on and really looking to develop. And then you obviously bringing in your younger players and your newer players into that environment as well. So I think Keane will be really good for that. Keane is he's excellent, he's organised, he's really confident in his own ability, but in a good way. So when he's speaking, you know what he's talking about, and he directs his communication across very well. So you look at it, he will be brilliant for them. There's no doubt about it. And like I said, with Pádraig Joyce coming into his third year now, it's probably what was needed in the Galway setup to bring in someone new, someone fresh, and someone that might be able to bring them in a different direction. Yeah,
now it's a really interesting and diverse group who are actually plotting the course. Like it's great having somebody who is an absolute legend in Joyce, and you had Divilly, obviously it seems like working on the football side of things, and now you've got somebody else just to kind of add that third pillar. And I'm sure there's other people who are important in the backroom team. But we talk about the position of Galway versus everybody else on a weekly basis when we're doing the power rankings, and like they just in recent years have flattered to deceive. So you can't put them in the top tier until they actually beat a top tier team in White Hot Championship and go, right, we are actually legitimately contenders here. And that has been the big knock on them. Is there a possibility they could bridge that gap this year?
There absolutely is. It's well documented at this stage how open this year's championship is, and you've just said that they're looking for one big win. Like that big win, they'll be looking for that in 6 or 7 weeks' time against Mayo. Like if they win that game, I'm sure the confidence that team will gain from that, it would simply elevate them. They go into a kind of final then on huge confidence, and then I suppose the All-Ireland series where they really haven't been in the last 10 years or so to a certain extent, possibly by 2018, that's when the real test will come. But I suppose at the minute we're all kind of wondering how good this Galway team is. I think Division 2 definitely suits them this year, especially with Keane coming in. They brought in a good crop of young players as well, and new players, a lot from the under-20 team that won the All-Ireland 2 years ago. So like I said, I think Division 2 is suiting them. I think they probably haven't played the best teams in Division 2 yet either. So I think that their games are coming now. I think they've Clare this weekend, followed by Roscommon then and Derry, and then you're possibly looking at a league final after that. So these 4 kind of tougher games in Division 2 will probably tell us a bit more about Galway. And I think definitely that's a good run in for them, especially if they get to a league final and possibly win Division 2 in the lead up to the Mayo game.
You couldn't ask for a better warm-up for Championship. You get to test yourself week on week on week against teams who are fairly similar standard but who are going to put you to the pin of your collar, and then you have to step up the graduation to the Mayo game. Like if you were plotting a course, maybe you'd want an easier game in the middle there to try some stuff out, but actually if you've got a fair idea what your team is, they're going to be able to, if all goes well for you, you can go on a roll now and catapult yourself into the Championship.
That's it, Sharon. Look, a winning game, everyone knows that winning games breed confidence. Everyone, if they were playing Division 1 this year, obviously wins are a lot harder to come by. You might get 2 or 3 wins, you know what I mean? And they might be going into that Mayo game, not as confident, as if they're after winning 7 or 8 games there in Division 2, possibly win a Division 2 title. It's probably between themselves and Derry for that accolade. But I think you're right in what you're saying there, just winning these games. And like Galway, you said they're around the same standard. I think Galway will see themselves better than Division 2 football. So they'll be just their full concentration of winning these games, literally getting through them, getting in Division 1, and then it's full focus then on Mayo in 7 weeks' time.
And as a Mayo fan, putting aside the objectivity of being an analyst this morning for us, how worried are you?
Yeah, well, you'd have to say Galway are improving. There's no doubt about it. I suppose, but like it's an ideal scenario if you're thinking about that Mayo game in 6 or 7 weeks' time. Like it's an ideal scenario for a Galway at the minute. They've had so little exposure TV-wise. No one is really sure how good or how good they aren't. I'm sure Pádraig Joyce is delighted with that, and they're just plugging along, getting their wins. And like I said, with Cian O'Neill, they will be improving. Now they're going to come up against a good Mayo team, and Mayo to win that game in 6 or 7 weeks' time are going to have to be at it. They're going to have to be 100%. And to me, it's the game of the Championship, definitely early doors.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about how things are in Mayo at the moment. However happy the Galway management must be, the Mayo management must be, with the obvious exception of Tommy Conroy's injury, relatively happy with the way things have gone so far in the league. You know, there's genuine strength and depth. There's a bomb squad if they need it coming off the bench. There's still more to come in the coming weeks, we hope, in terms of players returning. So, like, quietly, they've put together a great league.
They have, yeah, almost unexpectedly, to be honest, because I think they were generally laid back, starting back into the new year. Had a tough couple of games on paper early doors, but got the points from that, and I think from that they would have gained confidence. I think to date they've used 31 players, which is a huge amount. And they have made a lot of changes from the starting team from week to week. So it's going to be really interesting to see what team James goes with on Saturday night. I think this will be the strongest Mayo team so far to date that lines out in Tralee Saturday evening. I think it'll probably need to be coming up against Kerry, probably the informed team in the country. But if you go through the Mayo players at the minute that haven't really, like Brendan Harrison, Jason Doherty, Owen McLaughlin, all played the first 2 games and haven't played since. You have the likes of Darren Cohen, James Carr, Cillian O'Connor, who I wouldn't expect to see this weekend. I don't think he's going to be rushed, who haven't gotten any game time yet. And then you have the likes of, obviously, Aidan O'Shea hasn't started the game yet, Kevin McLaughlin hasn't started the game yet, and Inda Hession, after his breakthrough season last year, I'm sure he's pushing really hard in training to get a start. So when you factor in all them players have to come back in as well, it's going to be really, it's impossible really to pick the team for Saturday evening, which is probably a good thing, to be honest.
Is Oisín Mullen marking Clifford?
If I was a bet man, I'd say yeah. And I was actually just even thinking about potential matchups during the week. I would say Oisín will go back on David Clifford. Yeah, you could have a scenario where Paddy Durkin is on Sean O'Shea, Lee Keegan on Paddy Clifford, and then you go to midfield, Jack Barry possibly on Matty Ruan, Aidan O'Shea if he starts on Jeremy O'Connor, and down the other end then Ryan O'Donoghue on Tom O'Sullivan. So all the matchups, when you physically go through them, just make it even more mouth-watering prospect.
Why do Mayo love playing in Tralee so much?
Well, I don't know, I might be saying that on Saturday night, but I think generally over the last 10 years or so we've had a fairly good record down there. I don't know, generally when we've gone down there on a Saturday night, we've tended to stay even on the Friday night down there, which makes it a bit of a long weekend. But maybe it's the case, the fact that you're together all weekend or something like that, and it gives you that bit of an edge when you get down there. I'm not sure what the boys' arrangements are this weekend, if they're travelling down that day or not, but possibly that has something to do with it. But it's a great venue. And when that's a full house, you know, and I'm expecting it will be Saturday night, a full house. It's a great atmosphere, and Mayo always brings a good crowd with that as well, and it adds to it. So, yeah, I think generally maybe the fact that you're just together all weekend, and look, Kerry's always a big game. You're always going to get yourself up for that, and you'll probably raise your performance for it. And possibly that's why Mayo have had a decent record over there in the last 10 years or so in the league. I won't mention 2019 Killarney in the championship, but generally in the league, it's been decent.
I don't think there's been a home winner in that fixture in a long, long time, to be honest, because Kerry have got a great record in Castlebar recently as well. What's interesting, though, is that if we kind of pluck out a couple of years here, Colm, is that, say, 2017, I remember Kerry were very confident going into that game against Mayo in Tralee, and I think Andy Moran had an outstanding game, and Mayo come down and win that game. But the important thing was that it seemed like it was relevant come the summertime, that Kerry got a little bit spooked, and Mayo should have put them away almost the first day in the All-Ireland semi-final, never mind the replay that they won well in the end.
Yeah, it is, I suppose. You know, sometimes these league games can have a small bit of relevance. I suppose the other flip side of that, you know, I talked about 2019. We bet Kerry in the league down there in 19 as well in Tralee. We bet them in the league final, and then obviously it came to the Super 8s game in Killarney, and they totally dismantled us. So it can work both ways as well. It can be difficult to get the balance right, but you talked about that game there in 17, and Andy in that performance, he probably spooked them so much, you know, even in the 2 games in the semi-finals, he brought that level and them 2 games as well. So yeah, definitely, you know, for him marking the Kerry backs, if you have a good game, so just say for instance, if Oisín Mullins managed to have a good game on David Clifford, if they met again down the line of championship, I'm sure he'd bring great confidence from that into the game, and the same vice versa. If Clifford obviously gets the better of Oisín, it'd be similar for him down the line. So these little kind of psychological factors probably do come into into play later on in the championship.
Can I ask you then about those championship games in 2017, Colm? Because I'd kind of forgotten until doing a bit of reading this morning that obviously I remember that you scored the goal in the first game, in the first half, but that you were taken off after 48 minutes. And there was this big conversation, I'm sure you didn't see it at the time, on social media about why was Colm Boyle taken off after 48 minutes. It was almost as if it was a predetermined decision, that it was based on GPS marks or something like that. What was the truth there?
The truth was, we if you look at the player who actually came off me that day, it was actually Paddy Durcan.
Kicked the equaliser.
Yeah, 4 or 5 minutes into injury time. So the truth was, we had a strong panel, and Stephen was utilising the panel. Like, I'd heard all things that the GPS, that I wasn't clocking enough on the GPS, or that my hamstrings, that because of 50 minutes, I had to go after 50 minutes because of my hamstrings, even though I never had a hamstring injury in my life. You know what I mean? So you hear all these sorts of things, but I think generally it was the case that we had a strong panel. You know, there was great competition for the half back line in particular. Team Lee Keegan, Donald Vaughan, myself, Paddy Durcan. So it was literally a case of getting fresh legs in. That was all that was to it, and there was a lot made of it at the time. I know there was. I was hearing it myself, but that was generally it.
And then he leaves you until, I think, the 69th minute the second day, and you win. So there must have been a lesson in there somewhere.
Yeah, possibly so. Yeah. So
this weekend, will you? Are you thinking it's going to be a Mayo win? Are you thinking it's going to be a sort of early marker? Is it going to be another great Tralee night for Mayo?
Yeah, it's difficult to tell. Like, you know, I think Kerry are the informed, although both teams have the same amount of points. I think Kerry are the informed team in the country at the minute. If you even look at their margins of that they've won the games by Monaghan, Dublin, and Donegal, like, they've all been really, really comfortable. Obviously drew against Kildare again the first step, but they have been really, really comfortable. Mayo's margins of victory have been an awful lot tighter. I think Kerry have scored the most in the league, and they've conceded the less in Division 1. So they are getting that balance right. Obviously, we all know that probably on paper they're the top 6 forwards in the country, but they definitely look to be getting that balance right in defence now. And obviously Jack O'Connor brought in Paddy Tally for a reason. He probably felt that at the back was their Achilles heel, and Shipman scores. And at the minute, it looks like they've got that balance right. It looks like they're well set up. I wouldn't say they're getting a whole lot of bodies behind the ball or anything like that. I think it's just a case that their work rate is up. They're hunting the ball in packs, and they're turning over ball around the middle of the field, and they're utilising then obviously their strength is obviously their top 6 up front.
One last question. You've obviously established that these games can have an impact later on in the summer. Is there any part of James Horan that isn't thinking, or that is thinking, I'm not going to put my actual matchups that I will use in a championship match on display to give Kerry any tape? So I'm not going to give David Clifford the experience of being marked by Oisin Mullen. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do something totally different, and maybe even just go zonal and not reveal your hand.
Yeah, look, there's always that possibility, and the same from Jack O'Connor on his side. So there is that possibility. I just think they will match up as how they would plan if this was a championship game. I think they will. I think it'll line up something similar to what we called out earlier on. Now, you could be talking about this next week, and it could be nothing like we talked about. But I think it will. I think because both managers want to win this game. Jack O'Connor, I'm sure he's probably mentioned during the week to the Kerry lads about kind of Mayo's record down there the last 10 years. And setting down a marker for maybe later on the year as well. So I think Kerry are going to be really, really up for this. So it's going to be a really, really tough game for Mayo. But look, that it's a great game to have. It's probably the top game in the league so far. So like I said earlier on, full house in Tralee. Hopefully the weather allows for some kind of decent football that it hasn't really allowed for you could say top class inter-county football so far in the league. So hopefully we get a decent Saturday evening in Tralee, and just seeing two top teams really go at it.
There's a good chance this is part of a trilogy that they play this week. They play in a league final, and then they play later on in the summer.
Yeah, look, quite possibly so, and look, a lot of other teams will have something to say about that. I'm sure about that. Yeah, it's quite possible. Like certainly, another win possibly for each team might get them into a league final. So obviously, it's quite possible it could end up something similar to like 2019, where we played them the league final and then later on the championship. So yeah, it could be interesting a few weeks ahead, and there's not going to be a massive gap between them games realistically. Just say if it was Mayo carrying the league final, you're talking probably 3 weeks time. If they did meet in the All-Ireland Series, you're only talking another maybe 7 or 8 weeks after that. So there's not going to be a huge turnaround or a huge maybe difference in in performances or teams that's playing in them games or players that's playing in them games. So yeah, interesting times ahead.
Hopefully it's more Lord of the Rings and Godfather, and part 3 is the best part of the 3 of them.
Yeah, hopefully so.
Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers, Colm.
No problem, lads. Take care.
Colm Boyle giving us some thoughts there on the weekend's GAA action. But at 9:33 this morning, we're bringing you massive breaking news from the world of football. Roman Abramovich has been sanctioned officially by the UK government. All his UK assets have been frozen. Chelsea can still operate under a special licence, but the sale of the club is now on hold. The sanctions are wide-ranging and they relate to all commercial activity around the club. So Martin Ziegler is reporting this morning, and others, that the club will not be allowed to sell any more tickets. Only season ticket holders will be able to go to games for the foreseeable future. No merchandise will be available to be sold. Catering will be allowed at the matches, but this is an absolutely massive blow to Roman Abramovich and to Chelsea, and it's kind of about time. We've been talking about why the UK government hadn't done anything to sanction the oligarchs, but Abramovich is one amongst several that have been hit. Boris Johnson has this morning said there can be no safe havens for those who have supported the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and the details of, certainly what the UK government understands to be the relationship between Abramovich and Putin is now being spoken about openly by the UK government for the first time. And this news is just breaking in the last 10 minutes. But it's very interesting because they have essentially frozen the assets. No details yet on whether or not they might give those assets back, or if those assets are being seized in the same way that we saw the German authorities seizing the super yacht last week. It will be very interesting to see exactly what happens next.
Absolutely, and as you say there, what's really interesting is that you've got wording from the UK government on Putin's involvement in what's going on at the moment. So just a direct quote from what's been published this morning: Abramovich is associated with a person who is/has been involved in destabilising Ukraine and undermining/threatening territorial integrity, sovereignty and independence of Ukraine, namely Vladimir Putin, with whom he has had close relationships with for decades. It was interesting, Jonathan Wilson was on the show last week of The Guardian, saying that everything that The Guardian do can't really mention Putin and Abramovich's relationship. It is just a no-go area in terms of legality. I wonder, will this free up the press in the UK to, I guess, reveal more information about the exact sort of relationship that has existed between Abramovich and Putin and Russia? We still don't know as much as we might think about this guy, and I wonder will more information come to light as a result of this. Obviously that's the B side to the story. The A side is Chelsea Football Club.
Well, I think actually in a way Chelsea is the B side. That relationship is absolutely going to be front and centre now of all the conversations that we have, and more details on what we know about Abramovich and the source of his money and his relationship with Putin and the influence that may or may not have bought him in the past. Just again, under the licence that Chelsea have been given, subject to the conditions below, the club may pay remuneration, that's wages, allowances and pensions of all employees of the club, including the wages of players and coaching staff, fees, dividends and other allowances to directors of the club, payable under obligations which predate the date of the licence and are due in the period of this licence, but not any fees, dividends or other allowances to the DP. Reasonable fees or costs related to the ongoing maintenance, council tax, insurance. So the club will be allowed to function. It's just not going to be allowed to function at full capacity. We're rejoined by Martin Lipton to reflect on this breaking news this morning. What's your instinct here, Martin? What has happened in the last 24 hours that the government have decided to take this stance now against Abramovich?
I think things have just continued, haven't they? There was a hope that I thought he'd be given a degree of leeway to, basically get out of Dodge, was the injunction that this is coming. He knew it was coming. That's why he moved last week to put the club up for sale. The Premier League have been determined and insistent that whatever happened, there will be a carve-out that would allow the club to function. Otherwise, any fan putting a penny through the gate would be breaking the law. So there had to be that for obvious reasons. But it means that there's obviously no chance of any further funding from Abramovich. And the question is whether he'll be allowed to sell. I suspect not. It's not entirely clear. And Chelsea appear to be very much in limbo as a club at the moment.
That is interesting, that the fact that they needed the carve out. I guess, when you think about these things, swift action would maybe have resulted in a scenario where Chelsea were no longer allowed to function, which would have had knock-on impacts for the integrity of the league, and that could have ended up blown up in the in the government's face. So once that has happened, it seems as if Chelsea have been and are being given a licence to continue with the rest of the season. They'll be able to make match day happen. They won't be allowed to sell any more tickets. I don't know if Chelsea sell out as season tickets. I presume they don't.
They get a reasonable... they average about 42, don't they? There's a 44,000 capacity. The issue, I guess, is for away fans who haven't yet bought their tickets for those matches that aren't for sale yet. Will they be? They won't be allowed to buy them on that basis. It is really unclear. The Premier League needs to find out and to explain. They've got, I think, five or six home matches left, including Newcastle on Sunday, which is the battle of the two detested regimes, it would appear. It's a really interesting scenario. How does it play out? It would be unfair, for example, if other clubs couldn't send Arsenal for their big derby match, which is yet to be rearranged, couldn't have any fans at Stamford Bridge. That would be unfair. But if Chelsea can't sell tickets, then Arsenal couldn't have fans at the game.
I wonder, could they give tickets away for free to... maybe they can't take any revenue, but maybe they can still issue tickets.
I suppose they could issue them to the Premier League, who could then dispose of them. That would be, or give them straight to Arsenal even, and then Arsenal can make a decision about where the money goes. I mean, if that £20 or £30 cap was in place, then it would be a relatively minimal sum that was being raised. But there has to be some sort of way around it. Definitely, this is a huge issue, which is in the greater scheme of things minimal, but in football terms, it's quite important. What is clear is that a decision has been made at the highest level of the UK government, prompted, I suspect, by actions going to be taken by the EU and the US. But there you go, because I saw Abramovich listed on a potential list of US sanctions in just a couple of days ago. But it's got extremely serious now, and if anyone tells you they know how it's going to play out, they're lying, I suspect, because I'm not sure anyone knows.
What's going to be interesting as well is how quickly the Chelsea fans now rush to the defence of Roman Abramovich when, Martin, more information will be allowed to be reported in your own media. First off, I mean, just kind of, again, going through what's been published this morning from the UK government, one of the things that has been mentioned is that Abramovich is a shareholder of Everaz PLC, which is a steel manufacturing and mining company, which has supposedly been involved in supplying tanks, the production of tanks and other steel to the Russian military over the last little while. So he is a shareholder in a company that is actually helping the war, the invasion of Ukraine.
Directly linked
to
funding or propelling the invasion of Ukraine.
Correct. So,
I mean, that's as serious an allegation as you can get, I would argue.
Absolutely.
The fact there's an ongoing relationship with Putin, which he's always denied, as we know from the legal issues in the Catherine Belton book last year. This, whether proven or not, has now been alleged and stated as fact by the UK government. That's a significant upscaling of position, isn't it? Without any question. The tribality of football means that there will be some who will rush to his defence come what may. I think the majority of Chelsea supporters, I hope, will not take that stance. They can be proud and grateful of what Chelsea have done in the last 20 years. And until recently, the source of that money has not been an issue. Now it has become one. And tying Abramovich directly to Putin, as the UK government has done in this explanation for the sanctions list, is a pretty brutal act, to be honest, and one that will certainly make, I would think, a lot of supporters, even Chelsea supporters, start to question the concept of blind loyalty.
You really do hope so. Just to tease out what might happen to the club, if it's not allowed to be sold, then the question of ownership becomes very important very quickly. And then I do wonder about the possibility here for some kind of fan ownership, or some kind of, like, all of a sudden the club doesn't have the value that it had to Abramovich. It still has massive value to whoever wants to buy it. So I don't know, like, if nobody is on the other end of that transaction, do they need to realise all the value? They don't need to get 2 billion or 3 billion, because where's that money going to go?
Well, the thing, I guess, is if they can't sell, then the club has to become self-sufficient totally, because there's no further shareholder, owner, funding allowable, which means I suspect that any transfer plans go out the window. What they've got to do is to raise money by selling players who they wanted to keep, because otherwise they're not going to be able to freshen things up. And of course, knowing that they're in effectively any sale is a distress sale, the price of those assets will drop because it's a buyer's market. Then the value of the club drops because the quality of, the sort of the knock-on effect is absolutely huge. Whatever happened, it was going to be very different post Abramovich. I couldn't see anybody else coming in and being as keen to say at the final analysis, "Oh, go on then," when it came to the manager asking for money. Now it changes it even further. What's interesting also in that list, of course, is linked directly with Alisher Usmanov as well, who's also, rather involved with football at Everton, despite all the denials and statements to the contrary.
Yeah,
two clubs in lockstep, in a fatal embrace, it seems, in a dance of death.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Thanks very much for taking the call again this morning, Martin. Cheers to you. Thanks for that.
Cheers.
It's Martin Lipton giving us some reaction there to the breaking news this morning. We're also joined by Jonathan Wilson. Jonathan, the scale of the response from the British government this morning, I guess it's not surprising. It's just that it is so all-encompassing that we don't really know what's going to happen next. Obviously, the main story here is Roman Abramovich has been publicly linked by the British government as a Putin ally for decades. That's what the official line is from Whitehall this morning, and it opens up all sorts of conversations about why he bought Chelsea in the first place and all that kind of stuff. We can definitely talk about that. I do also just want to talk about the specifics of what it means from a football perspective. What's your instinct about what's next for Chelsea?
I think it's incredibly hard to tell. It's incredibly hard to know exactly what this means. So, I mean, from what I've been able to pick up in the last sort of 20 minutes or so, they're not even allowed to sell more tickets. So, okay, if you've got a season ticket already, if you've already got a ticket for a match, I think you're okay. I mean, this is obviously kind of the sort of lower end of it, the small scale of what the implications are. But what that means is, pretty quickly, they're not going to have money coming in. And if you haven't got money coming in, you can't pay wages. If you can't pay wages, those players can walk away from their contracts. You've got they play Middlesbrough in the FA Cup a week come Saturday. If they win that and they're in the semi-final, the clubs handle the ticket sales for the semi-final. So does that mean we're going to see a half-empty Wembley for an FA Cup semi-final? I mean, look, again, in the wider scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, but that's the scale of what this could be. There's very simple things like this club will not be able to sell tickets. Now, I'm not even sure how a sale of a club would go ahead. I mean, Abramovich clearly will still want to get rid of it, but if he's sanctioned, if his assets are frozen, presumably that means he cannot sell it. So you then have this asset that can't bring in any fresh money, and it's having to pay out wages. What happens to that? How does that club survive? And my suspicion is that pretty quickly it's not going to be able to survive. We're not going to be able to survive in its present form. Now, the government's already said there's an exception. As a sporting club, we're going to allow them to finish their fixtures this season. So there's not a knock-on effect for the Premier League. Whether they sort of introduce other loopholes to allow them to bring in some revenue, I don't know.
They'll have to survive off the TV deals and sponsorship that have already been in existence, but some of those sponsorship deals are no doubt due to wind down. Jonathan, I've got to say, we were having this conversation on the show over the last week or so about the possibility of the club being nationalised and handed over to fans. And just to repeat the idea, essentially, here now, nobody can buy this club because it can't be sold. The government are seizing the assets. We don't know if they're actually seizing them long term and saying you won't get them back ever, but it kind of feels that way because the suggestion is that he has been close to Putin for decades, and that's now in official documentation. So to then say, actually, that's grand, you can take the club back, no big deal, you can't really row back from that, which means now the British government and the British people own this asset. The right thing to do would be to hand it over to the fans of Chelsea in the style of the Green Bay Packers, or in the style even of the 50+1 in Germany. Like, there's loads of models out there for this club to be handed over now to the fans.
Yeah, there are. I mean, as I say, this only broke 20 minutes ago, so to quite whether that's legally possible. Exactly who does own it, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess technically Abramovich still owns it. He's just not allowed to profit from it. So I don't know at what point he is forced to relinquish that. But I mean that certainly is, particularly given the nature of his statements about he wanted to hand over care and stewardship of the club to trustees. Maybe he would be open to that. Although I don't really see what he has to gain from that now. When he made that offer, I think it was fairly transparently to sort of wriggle Chelsea away from any potential action from the government. Well, that action's now happened. So I don't know what he would gain by giving up Chelsea, apart from maybe some goodwill. But I also think he's probably got bigger things to worry about now.
There's a travel ban associated with this, and the details of his passport number has been published. His 2 passports. He's got a Portuguese passport and an Israeli passport. And as we've just said earlier, the official list of financial sanctions does include details of his relationship with Usmanov and ultimately with Vladimir Putin and with companies associated with supplying the war effort in Russia. So it is obviously the government in London have decided that they're going to reveal as much of the background information that they have about Roman Abramovich right now.
Yeah, and I think that is telling. I mean, this is somebody, don't forget, who would take legal action against anybody. Over the last 19 years, he's taken legal action against anybody who suggested links with Putin. There was even suggestions yesterday that although MPs could say things on the parliamentary privilege, that potentially libel actions could be launched against journalists who reported what was said in Parliament. Now, legally, that's a pretty grey area, but the danger of that is that just the act of having to fight libel action can be so cripplingly expensive that would restrict what journalists could say. Now, you have this statement coming out this morning, which it's a government document. Clearly, we are allowed to quote that. And also, you now think, well, the lawyers who were acting for him, presumably they're not going to get paid either. So there's absolutely no incentive for them to be pursuing these actions. So I do wonder what else will come out as a result of that. And I think this openness from the government is almost sort of preempting that. It's sort of saying, look, here's all the stuff we know. It's open season.
That's what I was just about to ask, actually. Is it a complete game changer? I presume there's been a whole heap of stories that have been suppressed within the football media in England over the last few years with regards to Abramovich.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of worked, the extreme litigiousness. I mean, just to give you a very banal example, before the Champions League semi-finals last season, which were Real Madrid, City, Manchester City, that is obviously PSG and Chelsea. Clearly all of them have, should we say, interesting ownership. I was sort of really writing about PSG and Manchester City and about Qatar and Abu Dhabi, and I made passing reference to Abramovich, and the Guardian's lawyers took out that paragraph because they said that even a passing reference was enough to land us in trouble. So when you say the lawyers are that nervous, it just discourages you from ever saying anything. Well, clearly those restrictions now are being lifted, and who knows what might come out.
In fairness, we've been critical of the speed with which various governments around the world have been acting, kind of inspired by how fast Germany seized the super yacht last week. But there are 204 separate named Russian-connected citizens in this document published this morning, and there's a bunch of other entities, as in corporations, companies, banks, etc., who have now had similar response assets frozen. This is a massive moment in terms of the sanctions that the UK have taken against Russia in the aftermath of the war. And Abramovich is obviously the story that we're talking about, but as the detail emerges of all of the other people who have been sanctioned here, like the powerlessness of the West to intervene in what Russia have been doing with Ukraine, or certainly the fact that they haven't been willing to, stuff like this actually really matters. Like Roman Abramovich did have a connection with Chelsea for a strategic reason, to try and protect him if something like this happened, and the fact that he has been unable to do so hopefully is a very important moment in football, and potentially, you would hope, in influencing what's coming next.
Well, I think it's certainly significant in terms of the UK government and London generally's relationship with Russia. I mean, there was a study earlier this week which suggested that Russian assets in the UK amounted to 11% of UK GDP, which is obviously a phenomenal amount. You also think if the government were able to seize that, I mean, presumably a lot of it would go to the rebuilding efforts in Ukraine, but it also would it might clear a lot of the concerns about sort of post-COVID debts and things. So I can see there's a sort of immediate financial attraction, albeit cutting off a previous source of wealth generally for the city and for law firms in London. And obviously the Conservative Party has been several millions of pounds of donations to the Conservative Party from Russians. So in that sense, yes, it is a massive step change for the UK in terms of its relationship with Russia and Russian wealth. Whether it's a massive change for football, I'm not sure, because you still have Saudi Arabia, or the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, which the Premier League has decided is completely separate from the state of Saudi Arabia owning Newcastle. You still have Abu Dhabi owning Manchester City. Whether fans of those clubs now are going to be a bit more anxious about their ownership, if only for the practical reason that they're going to see what happens to Chelsea when suddenly there's no income. I don't know, but certainly I think going forward, fans of other potential clubs that might be purchased from overseas states or oligarchs, they may not be quite so welcoming as we've seen over the last 20 years.
All right, look, we're going to leave it there. Thanks a million for taking the call at such short notice this morning, Jonathan. It's obviously a lot of information to parse. I do think that fan ownership is the way forward here, and it's on the table if enough people kind of start talking about it.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I mean, as I say, I just don't know the legalities around that. But I mean, clearly, long term, if you were setting up a new football utopia, you would ensure there is some level of fan control to try and prevent this kind of thing happening.
Jonathan Wilson, great to have you with us. Thanks a million.
Cheers, thanks.
You can read his stuff in The Guardian. You can hear him on Football Weekly as well. Right, big breaking news, obviously, and we're trying to sift through the details and information. And as I said, the document that the Treasury in the UK have this morning published is like 42 pages of, I don't know, is that 7 or 8 font? It's certainly tiny little font, but they were pulling no punches when it came to Roman Abramovich. He is the second name on the list. I'm fairly sure that it is done by alphabetical order, but he's the big fish in terms of what they're writing about and his links and the suggestions that the British government, the belief that the British government have about Abramovich's links with Putin. He's a prominent Russian businessman, pro-Kremlin oligarch. Abramovich is associated with a person who is or has been involved in destabilising Ukraine, undermining and threatening the territorial integrity, sovereignty and independence of Ukraine, namely Vladimir Putin. It's written down in black and white. Now, it's quite possible the British government knew this a long time ago. Could have shared this information with the Premier League, maybe.
Just one other thing there, just see Tariq Banja saying that the club can receive broadcast fees and merit payments, but those then must be frozen. So television money isn't going to be able to fund a summer transfer window, for example.
Yeah,
in the current scenario.
They've seized the club.
Yeah,
take it, give it to the fans. Just like that. Just go, while we're at it, sorry, here's what we've decided to do. And it's fast, as opposed to getting involved in this wrangling about the assets. I mean, if he doesn't have access to his finances anymore, it's going to be difficult for him to find people to represent his side of the story. And the point I think about the legality is it legal just to take someone's assets? Under extreme circumstances it is. And when you get those assets, what are you going to do with them? This is like when the Criminal Assets Bureau gets stuff, they wait a while and then they put it up for sale. And then in this instance, we've decided that football is important enough to go, we're giving this to the community, and it's going to be a share ownership run for the benefit and by the supporters. And there are a load of models out there. It's very easy to do and it's pretty easy to sort out. So
significant, definitely, to say the least.
Yeah. Right, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. If you've just been introduced to us by this podcast or on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. Hit the subscribe button, youtube.com/off the ball. We're here every day. Or you can subscribe to the podcast as well. We'll see you tomorrow.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliation.